The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields bend space according to predictable mathematics. Subspace follows consistent rules. Energy signatures classify into known categories. But what happens when sensors detect something that shouldn't exist? When a vessel appears that defies every theory, every database entry, every rational explanation the Federation has catalogued across 100 worlds. Captain James T. Kirk stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise, studying the impossible readings scrolling across his science station view screen. They'd been charting gaseous anomalies in the Matara sector when long-range sensors picked up the signature: massive, unprecedented, and completely alien. "Mr. Spock," Kirk said, keeping his voice level despite the tension coiling in his chest. "Confirm those readings." The Vulcan science officer didn't look up from his station. One eyebrow arched in that expression Kirk had learned meant genuine scientific fascination. "Confirmed, Captain. The object measures approximately 1.2 kilometers in length. Energy output suggests a vessel, though the configuration matches nothing in Federation records, or those of the Klingon Empire, Romulan Star Empire, or any known civilization." 1.2 kilometers? Dr. McCoy stepped closer to the railing, his southern drawl thick with disbelief. "Jim, that's nearly 4 times the size of a Constitution-class starship. What the hell could build something that big?" "Unknown, Doctor," Spock replied, fingers dancing across his controls. "However, the energy signature is equally anomalous. The vessel appears to be powered by a source I cannot classify. It does not match matter-antimatter reactions, fusion processes, or any form of plasma generation in our database. Furthermore, the whole composition contains elements and alloys that—" He paused, recalibrating. "Should not be structurally possible given our understanding of metallurgy." Kirk exchanged a glance with his chief medical officer. In 3 years of exploring strange new worlds, they'd encountered plenty of mysteries. Ancient machines. Powerful entities. Technologies beyond Federation science. But something in Spock's tone suggested this was different. "Condition?" Kirk asked. "The vessel is adrift, Captain. Minimal power output, though primary systems appear functional. I am detecting life signs, human, surprisingly, numbering in the thousands. However, there are also significant hull breaches and what appears to be battle damage across multiple sections. Thousands of humans, adrift in space, on a ship that shouldn't exist." Kirk felt the familiar weight of command settle across his shoulders. Whatever this was, whoever these people were, they needed help. That made it Starfleet's problem. Uhura, open hailing frequencies. All standard channels. The communications officer's hands moved with practiced grace across her board. "Hailing frequencies open, Captain. Broadcasting on all Federation standard channels and emergency frequencies." Kirk straightened in his chair, aware that first contact, even with humans, could be delicate. "Attention, unknown vessel. This is Captain James T. Kirk of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. We've detected your distress and are prepared to render assistance. Please respond." Static hissed through the bridge speakers. Then, after a moment that stretched too long, a voice crackled through, male, young, and carrying the unmistakable edge of someone who'd been through combat. "Enterprise, this is Lieutenant Commander Rick Hunter of the Super Dimension Fortress 1. We read you." There was a pause, and Kirk heard muffled conversation in the background. "We're not sure where we are. Our navigation systems aren't matching any known star charts. What's your position relative to Earth?" Spock's eyebrow climbed higher. Kirk leaned forward. "Commander Hunter, you're approximately 47 light-years from Earth, and what we designate as the Matara sector. Can you clarify your vessel's origin? We have no records of any Earth ship designated SDF-1. Another pause, longer this time. When Hunter's voice returned, it carried a new tension. "Captain, what year is it?" Kirk felt ice touch his spine. Temporal displacement. Of course. That would explain the impossible technology, The unknown vessel configuration. Stardate 5928.5. Earth calendar year 2268. Commander, when did you leave Earth? 2009. Hunter's voice was flat, controlled. We were engaged with Zentraedi forces when our fold system malfunctioned. We didn't just fold through space, did we? It appears not, Commander. Kirk chose his words carefully. Given your vessel's condition, I'm offering immediate assistance. We can provide medical support, engineering consultation, and diplomatic contact with the Federation Council. Will you accept? The silence stretched longer this time. Kirk could imagine the conversation happening on that massive ship's bridge, a commander weighing options, calculating risks, deciding whether to trust strangers in an impossible situation. Captain Kirk, Hunter finally said, we appreciate the offer. But before we accept anything, I need to understand something. What is the Federation? And what happened to Earth in the last 250 years? Kirk smiled slightly. Smart. Cautious. Good qualities in a commander. That's going to take more than a subspace transmission, Commander Hunter. Permission to come aboard? If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Rick Hunter stared at the forward view screen of the SDF-1's bridge, watching the unfamiliar starship maneuver closer. Sleek, elegant, nothing like the brutal functionality of Zentraedi cruisers or even Earth's pre-war vessels. The Enterprise moved with confidence, her hull gleaming under distant starlight. Skipper, their technology is decades beyond anything we've got, Claudia Grant said from the communications station, her dark eyes scanning readouts. Their power systems alone are generating output we need the main gun to match. And they're doing it continuously. Beside Hunter, Commander Lisa Hayes studied her tactical displays with the same analytical precision that made her the SDF-1's finest operations officer. No weapons locked. They're maintaining a respectful distance. If this is first contact protocol, it's more polite than anything we ever got from the Zentraedi. Rick ran a hand through his dark hair, feeling the weight of 70,000 civilians and military personnel depending on his next decision. They'd survived the initial Zentraedi attack on Earth, the disastrous fold that took them to Pluto, and the long journey back fighting every kilometer. Now this, displaced not just in space but in time, in a universe where their protoculture reserves were finite and dwindling. What do you think, Lisa? She met his eyes, and he saw the same calculation he was running. We need information. We need allies. And unless our sensors are completely wrong, we need whatever technology lets them cross 47 light-years like it's a Sunday drive. Rick nodded slowly. Claudia, tell Captain Kirk he's welcome aboard. Standard docking procedures, though I doubt our airlocks are compatible. We'll need to arrange transporter reception. Transporter? Lisa frowned. Something they mentioned, Rick said, pulling up the communication logs. Some kind of matter-energy conversion system for moving personnel. Sounds like science fiction, but then again, so does everything about today. He stood, straightening his uniform. Somewhere in the civilian sections, Lin Minmay was probably preparing for another concert, trying to keep morale up among the refugees who'd lost everything when the Zentraedi attacked. Somewhere in the Veritech hangars, Roy Fokker was running his Skull Squadron through maintenance, keeping their transformable fighters ready for combat that might never come. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the Federation of Planets, whatever that was, had sent a ship to make first contact with survivors from a war that hadn't happened yet in this timeline. Rick Hunter had joined the military to fly, not to play diplomat. But command meant making impossible choices. Set condition yellow, he ordered. Diplomatic protocols, but keep the barrier system on standby. Let's find out what kind of universe we landed in. The transporter effect was unlike anything Rick Hunter had ever experienced. One moment he stood in the SDF-1's primary docking bay with Lisa Hayes and Roy Fokker flanking him, watching the designated coordinates with weapons-ready security teams positioned at careful intervals. The next, golden light shimmered into existence, and 3 figures materialized from nothing. Matter coalescing from energy in a process that defied every principle of physics Rick had learned at the Robotech Defense Force Academy. Captain Kirk appeared first, command gold uniform crisp, eyes already assessing the vast hangar with a practice scan. A pointed-eared officer in blue followed, tricorder already active and sweeping the environment. The third wore medical insignia and carried the expression of someone perpetually skeptical of the universe's latest surprise. "Commander Hunter," Kirk said, extending a hand with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to making first contact. "Thank you for receiving us." Rick shook it, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. Whatever else had changed in 250 years, some fundamentals of military courtesy remained constant. "Captain Kirk, welcome aboard the SDF-1. He gestured to his companions. "Commander Lisa Hayes, our operations officer. Commander Roy Fokker, Skull Squadron leader. My science officer, Commander Spock," Kirk indicated the Vulcan. "And Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Leonard McCoy." Rick watched Spock's tricorder sweep across the docking bay, taking in the rows of Veritech fighters in their Guardian mode configurations, 30-foot-tall mechanized warriors standing ready in ranks that stretched into the distance. The Vulcan's eyebrow rose fractionally. "Fascinating. Captain, these appear to be variable configuration combat vehicles. The engineering required to achieve stable transformation between multiple forms while maintaining structural integrity and weapon systems integration is..." He paused, recalibrating. "Remarkable. Veritechs," Roy said, pride evident in his voice despite the situation. "Variable fighters. They transform between fighter jet, Guardian, and Battloid modes. Been using them to stay alive against the Zentraedi for the past few years." "Zentraedi?" Kirk's tone sharpened slightly, not alarm, but the heightened attention of a commander hearing a potential threat designation. Lisa stepped forward, her strategic mind already organizing information. "The alien force that attacked Earth. Giant humanids, militaristic culture, technology centuries beyond what we had in 2009. Their assault devastated Earth and forced us to rebuild this ship." She gestured at the vast interior surrounding them. "From the wreckage of their own vessel that crashed on our planet a decade earlier." McCoy's eyes widened. "You rebuilt an alien warship? Without understanding the technology?" "We understood enough," Rick said. "Barely. The ship's original systems were based on something called protoculture, an energy source we still don't fully comprehend. But it worked, and when the Zentraedi came, it was the only thing powerful enough to fight back." Spock's tricorder emitted a higher-pitched tone. "Captain, I am detecting the energy source Commander Hunter mentioned. The readings are unprecedented. It does not correspond to any known power generation method. Matter-antimatter reactions produce specific gamma-ray signatures. Fusion creates characteristic neutron emissions. This produces either. Instead, I am reading what appears to be dimensional energy fluctuations on a quantum level." "English Spock," McCoy muttered. "The vessel is powered by energy drawn from another dimension, Doctor. The implications are staggering." Kirk exchanged glances with his officers, then turned back to Rick with renewed intensity. "Commander, I think we need to have a longer conversation. Preferably somewhere we can speak frankly." Rick nodded. "Conference room. This way." They walked through corridors that dwarfed anything on the Enterprise, passages designed for a ship that housed a city's worth of personnel. Rick noticed Kirk's tactical assessment of their route, the way the captain cataloged escape routes and defensive positions with the automatic awareness of someone who'd seen combat. Good. They understood each other on that level, at least. The conference room overlooked one of the SDF-1's residential sections, visible through reinforced transparent steel windows. Civilians moved through streets and buildings that had been reconstructed inside the massive vessel. Apartments, shops, even a park where children played under artificial sunlight. Kirk stopped at the window, studying the scene with something like wonder. "You're carrying a city," he said quietly. We didn't have a choice, Lisa explained, bringing up holographic displays that showed Earth's devastation. The Zentraedi bombardment hit every major population center. When we activated the ship's fold system to escape, we accidentally brought a significant portion of our surrounding area with us. Buildings, people, infrastructure. 70,000 civilians and 20,000 military personnel, all folded to the edge of the solar system in an instant. And you've kept them alive, Kirk said. For years, fighting your way back to Earth while protecting non-combatants. That's impressive, Commander Hunter. Rick felt the weight of those years, every decision, every loss, every impossible choice made in the name of survival. We did what we had to do. But that brings us to our current problem. He activated another display, showing the SDF-1's power reserves, protoculture levels declining in steady, unforgiving graphs. Our fuel source is finite. In our universe, we had facilities on Earth that could refine protoculture. Here in your timeline. He let the implication hang. Spock studied the data with intense focus. The dimensional variance would prevent conventional refinement. The energy exists in quantum superposition, drawing from a dimension that may not be accessible in our universe's physical framework. Based on current consumption rates and assuming no additional combat operations, you have approximately 18 months of reserves remaining. 18 months. Roy repeated, jaw tight. Then what? We drift? 70,000 people frozen in space on a dead ship? That's unacceptable, Kirk said flatly. The Federation doesn't abandon refugees, regardless of their origin. We'll find a solution. With respect, Captain, Lisa said, her tone carrying diplomatic steel. We've just met. The Federation may have protocols and principles, but we've learned the hard way that survival depends on our own capabilities. We appreciate your offer of assistance, but we need to understand what we're getting into before we accept anything. Kirk smiled slightly. Not offense taken, but recognition of a kindred spirit. Fair enough, Commander. Then let's lay our cards on the table. You want information about the Federation, our technology, and whether we can help with your power crisis. We want to understand your vessel, your enemy, and whether the Zentraedi represent a threat to Federation space. He sat at the conference table, gesturing for the others to join. Mutual benefit. Mutual transparency. Sound reasonable? Rick settled into a chair, Roy and Lisa flanking him. Across the table, Kirk's command team mirrored the formation. Two groups of officers, separated by centuries and circumstance, trying to find common ground in the aftermath of an impossible accident. Reasonable, Rick agreed. So let's start with the obvious question. Captain, what exactly is the United Federation of Planets? Kirk leaned back, considering where to begin. An alliance of worlds, Commander. Over 150 member planets, species united by common principles, peaceful exploration, mutual cooperation, respect for sentient life. We're explorers first, though we maintain Starfleet for defense and crisis response. Explorers, Roy said, skepticism evident. With a military organization. Starfleet isn't strictly military, McCoy interjected. We're scientists, diplomats, engineers. We carry weapons, but our primary mission is discovery. Rick thought of the Zentraedi, warriors bred for nothing but combat, unable to comprehend concepts like peace or diplomacy. In our experience, the universe isn't that kind. How do explorers survive when they encounter something hostile? We adapt, Kirk said simply. We've faced hostile species, aggressive empires, beings of immense power. Sometimes we fight. Often, we find alternatives. His eyes held Rick's. But we don't run from refugees who need help, and we don't ignore potential threats. Which brings us back to the Zentraedi. Tell me about them. The briefing lasted 3 hours. Rick walked Kirk's team through the Zentraedi War, the initial attack, the desperate battles, the discovery that Earth's culture itself was a weapon against an enemy that had forgotten the concepts of individuality and compassion. Spock's tricorder never stopped recording, the Vulcan's analytical mind processing tactical data that spoke of a conflict unlike anything in Federation records. "Let me understand this correctly," Kirk said, studying holographic projections of Zentraedi fleet formations. "Your primary defensive strategy relies on cultural contamination? Music, relationships, individual identity, these concepts destabilize their military cohesion." "It sounds insane when you say it like that," Roy admitted. "But yeah, the Zentraedi have been cloned and conditioned for warfare so long they've lost everything else. When their soldiers encountered human culture, especially through Lin Nimei's music, some of them defected. Started questioning orders. It gave us an edge." McCoy shook his head in wonder. "A war won with songs and romance. Jim, maybe there's hope for the galaxy after all." "Don't romanticize it, Doctor," Lisa said sharply. "Billions died. Earth burned. We used culture as a weapon because we had no other choice against an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority. It worked, but the cost." She trailed off, staring at tactical displays that showed devastated cities and casualty projections. Rick saw Kirk process that, saw the captain's expression shift from curiosity to understanding. Whatever else separated them, they both knew the weight of command decisions measured in lives. "The fold accident," Spock said, changing direction with Vulcan directness. "You mentioned your hyperspace system malfunctioned during combat. I would like to examine the drive mechanism. The dimensional breach that brought you here may still be detectable, and understanding its nature is crucial." "Our chief engineer can arrange that," Rick said. "But there's something you need to understand about protoculture technology, Commander Spock. We don't fully comprehend how it works. The ship's original systems were built by the Robotech Masters, the Zentraedi's creators and masters. We've reverse-engineered what we can, adapted human technology to interface with alien systems, but fundamentally, we're flying on educated guesswork." Spock's eyebrow arched higher than Rick had yet seen. "You are operating a vessel of this magnitude on incomplete understanding of its primary systems? That is, inadvisable." "Inadvisable beats dead," Roy countered. "We worked with what we had." Before Spock could respond, the SDF-1's intercom crackled to life. "Bridge to Commander Hunter." Claudia Grant's voice carried urgency. "Sir, we have a situation. Long-range sensors just picked up another vessel entering the sector. Configuration unknown, but it's moving fast and headed directly for our position." Rick was on his feet instantly, Lisa and Roy already moving toward the door. "Captain Kirk, you might want to contact your ship. We could have company." Kirk touched his communicator. Kirk to Enterprise. "Status report, Mr. Sulu." "Captain, we're detecting an incoming vessel on an intercept course. Klingon design, D7 battlecruiser configuration. ETA 15 minutes at current speed." The conference room's atmosphere shifted immediately. Rick felt the change in Kirk's demeanor, still controlled, but with the heightened readiness of a commander expecting trouble. "Klingon," Kirk said. "Commander Hunter, I need you to understand something quickly. The Klingon Empire is a warrior culture, expansionistic and aggressive. They're not Federation allies. If they're coming here, it's because they detected your ship and want to know what you are. Are they hostile?" Lisa asked, already calculating tactical responses. "That depends on their commander and what they think they can gain," Kirk replied. "But Klingon respect strength and direct communication. Weakness or deception gets you killed." Roy grinned without humor. "Sounds like the Zentraedi, just smaller." They reached the SDF-1's bridge at a run. The command center sprawled across multiple levels, stations manned by personnel who'd been fighting for survival since before most Federation officers had graduated from the academy. Tactical displays showed the approaching Klingon vessel, sleek, predatory, weapons systems already active. "Range?" Rick demanded. 2 million kilometers and closing," the sensor officer reported. "They're hailing us, sir. Audio only, no visual." Rick looked at Kirk, who nodded. "Open the channel." The voice that filled the bridge was deep, commanding, touched with dark amusement. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Corps of the Imperial Klingon Defense Force. You will identify yourselves and explain your presence in this sector. Failure to comply will be interpreted as hostile intent." Kirk stepped forward, speaking before Rick could respond. "Commander Corps, this is Captain James Kirk of the Federation Starship Enterprise. The vessel you're addressing is under Federation diplomatic protection. I suggest you reconsider your approach." A pause. Then Corps' laughter rumbled through the speakers, genuine, appreciative. "Kirk, I should have known you would find something interesting in this forsaken region of space." "Very well, Captain. I will honor diplomatic protocols. For now. But my sensors tell me that enormous ship is like nothing the Federation possesses. I am curious." "Curiosity is natural, Commander Corps. But this situation requires delicate handling. Perhaps we could arrange a more formal meeting to discuss." "I am Klingon, Kirk. We do not discuss from a distance when glory and discovery await. I am approaching to inspect this magnificent vessel personally. If your new friends object, they are welcome to try stopping me. It would make the day more interesting." The channel closed. Rick turned to Kirk, keeping his voice level despite the surge of adrenaline. "Is he always like that?" "Corps is one of the Klingon Empire's finest commanders," Kirk said carefully. "Honorable by his culture standards, but that culture values combat prowess and direct confrontation over diplomacy. He won't attack without provocation, but he will test your resolve." Lisa pulled up tactical analysis of the Klingon cruiser. Disruptor banks, photon torpedoes, forward-mounted disruptor cannon. Comparable firepower to a Zentraedi cruiser, though the design philosophy is completely different. They rely on speed and maneuverability rather than brute force. "Can the SDF-1 handle them?" McCoy asked, medical concern warring with tactical curiosity. Roy laughed. "Doc, this ship was built to fight vessels that make that Klingon cruiser look like a fighter jet. Our main gun could vaporize his ship from here. The question is whether we want to start an interstellar incident on our first day in this universe." Rick studied the approaching vessel, weighing options with the instinct honed through years of combat. The Klingon respected strength. Kirk had made that clear. Showing weakness would invite aggression. But demonstrating too much power might provoke exactly the conflict they needed to avoid. "Captain Kirk, what's your recommendation?" Kirk met his eyes, and Rick saw respect there, acknowledgement that despite the Federation's offer of protection, this was ultimately Hunter's decision to make. "Let Corps come aboard. Show him enough to satisfy his curiosity, but not so much that he sees you as a threat to the Empire." Klingon understand warrior culture. You've been fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. That's something Corps will respect. And if respect isn't enough, then we deal with it together. Kirk said simply. The Enterprise will stand with you. Rick glanced at Lisa, saw her nod of agreement. Roy's hand rested casually near his sidearm, ready, but not aggressive. His crew trusted his judgment. 70,000 lives depended on making the right call. All right, Rick decided. We'll receive Commander Corps. Standard diplomatic protocols, but I want Skull Squadron on standby in the hangar bay. If this goes sideways, I want visible deterrence. Spoken like a warrior. Kirk approved. Corps will appreciate that. The Klingon battlecruiser swept closer, its angular hull bristling with weapons, moving with the predatory grace of something built for combat. On the forward view screen, the vessel filled more and more space, growing from distant threat to immediate presence. Spock consulted his tricorder, then looked up with something approaching alarm. Captain, I am detecting a significant energy buildup in the SDF-1's primary weapon system. The power levels are increasing exponentially. Rick turned to his weapons officer. Lieutenant, I didn't order the main gun charged. Automated defensive response, sir, the officer reported. The system detected an approaching hostile vessel and began charging sequence. It's a failsafe we installed after the Zentraedi kept catching us unprepared. Stand down that system immediately, Rick ordered. Last thing we need is core thinking we're preparing to fire. Sir, the shutdown sequence takes 90 seconds. The weapon is already at 40% charge. On the view screen, the Klingon cruiser's weapons suddenly locked onto the SDF-1, photon torpedo tubes glowing with readiness. Kirk's communicator chirped urgently. Captain, the Klingon vessel is targeting the SDF-1. Their weapons are armed and... Core! Kirk snapped into his communicator. Stand down! This is a misunderstanding. Core's voice returned, sharp with battle eagerness. Your friends are powering a weapon of extraordinary magnitude, Kirk. I will not allow them to fire first. They have 30 seconds to shut down that system, or I will interpret it as an act of war. Rick felt time compress, the familiar sensation of combat decisions made in heartbeats while consequences stretched across lifetimes. 70,000 people depending on his next words. 2 alien powers watching, judging, deciding whether to help or destroy. He leaned forward, voice carrying absolute command authority. Commander Core, this is Rick Hunter. The weapon system you detected is powering down as we speak. It was an automated response, not a threat. If you're the warrior Captain Kirk claims, you'll recognize the difference between a defensive reflex and genuine aggression. Silence stretched across subspace, taut as a wire. Rick counted heartbeats, watching the Klingon cruiser's weapons remain locked on target. Then Core's laughter returned, booming and genuine. Well spoken, Hunter! Yes, I see the difference. A warrior who admits defensive measures without groveling or making excuses. I like you already? Very well, your vessel has earned the right to be heard. Prepare to receive me. Let us see what manner of warriors command such a magnificent ship. The channel closed. Rick exhaled slowly, feeling tension bleed from the bridge crew. Commander, Spock said quietly, that was a calculated risk. Commander Core might have fired regardless of your explanation. Yeah, Rick agreed. But he didn't. And now we get to find out what happens when a Klingon warrior meets a Robotech fighter pilot. Kirk smiled grimly. This should be interesting. Commander Core materialized in the SDF-1's docking bay with 2 Klingon warriors flanking him, their ridged foreheads and dark uniforms marking them as clearly alien in ways that transcended mere physical differences. Where Kirk carried diplomatic warmth beneath military bearing, Core radiated predatory confidence, a commander who measured worth through combat prowess and expected the universe to accommodate his strength. His eyes went immediately to the Veritech fighters arrayed in Guardian mode, and Rick saw genuine appreciation flash across the Klingon's features. Magnificent, Core breathed, approaching the nearest mecha with the reverence of a warrior recognizing superior weaponry. Transformable war machines. I heard Kirk's science officer mention this capability, but seeing them. He circled the 30-foot-tall Guardian, studying articulation points and weapon mounts with expert assessment. How many configurations? 3, Roy answered, stepping forward with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years mastering Veritech combat. Fighter mode for atmospheric and space superiority. Guardian mode for versatility. Battloid mode for ground combat and close-quarters engagement. Demonstrate. It wasn't a request. Roy glanced at Rick, who nodded. The Skull Squadron leader climbed into the nearest Veritech's cockpit, systems powering up with familiar hums. The transformation was fluid, practiced, Guardian folding into sleek fighter jet configuration in seconds, then unfolding again into the humanoid Battloid form, arms extending with integrated weapons systems. Core's warriors reached for their disruptors, but the commander raised a hand, stopping them. His eyes gleamed with something between respect and hunger. The engineering required to achieve this, your weapons designers are geniuses or madmen. Perhaps both. We prefer the term desperate, Rick said. The Zentraedi forced us to innovate or die. The Veritex gave us tactical flexibility against enemies with superior numbers and firepower. Zentraedi. Core rolled the word across his tongue, testing its weight. Kirk mentioned these giants. A warrior race, yes? I would have enjoyed meeting them in battle. Trust me, Commander, you wouldn't have enjoyed it, Lisa said sharply. They don't fight for honor or glory. They fight because they were bred for nothing else. No concept of mercy, negotiation, or individual achievement. Just overwhelming force applied to total annihilation. Kor studied her with new interest. You speak from experience, Commander Hayes. How many battles have you survived against these Zentraedi? Enough to stop counting. The Klingon commander laughed, genuinely pleased. Yes. I see why Kirk speaks well of you. You are warriors who have earned your rank through blood and necessity, not Federation softness and exploration protocols. He turned to Kirk with mock disapproval. No offense to your career, Kirk, but the Federation wastes potential with all its diplomatic hand-wringing. The Federation prefers living warriors to glorious corpses. Kirk replied evenly. But we've had this debate before, Kor. Indeed we have. Kor turned back to Rick, expression shifting to something more calculating. Commander Hunter, your ship interests me greatly. Its power signature suggests weapon systems that would make Klingon engineers weep with envy. Your fighters transform in ways that would revolutionize ground assault doctrine. And you command 70,000 humans with the authority of one who has led them through hell itself. He paused, letting implications hang. The Klingon Empire values such warriors. We could offer you alliance, resources, purpose. The Federation will smother you with regulations and prime directives. Join us, and we will help you return home as conquerors. Rick felt the offer's weight, saw his officers react with varying degrees of alarm. Kirk remained carefully neutral, though McCoy looked ready to object. That's a generous offer, Commander Kor, Rick said slowly, measuring each word. But I have questions. First, what exactly would the Klingon Empire expect in return for this alliance? Kor smiled, appreciating directness. Your technology, shared freely with our engineers. Your tactical expertise against enemies who employ overwhelming numbers. And when the time comes, your support in conflicts against the Romulan Star Empire and other threats to Klingon glory. We do not demand subservience, Hunter. We offer partnership between warriors. Partnership where the SDF-1 becomes a Klingon asset, Lisa said flatly. Where our protoculture technology gets reverse-engineered and mass-produced for the Empire's war machine. Where 70,000 civilians become leverage to ensure our cooperation. Kor's expression hardened. You insult Klingon honor with such implications, Commander Hayes. We do not take hostages or threaten the innocent. We offer strength to strength, warrior to warrior. And if we refuse? Rick asked. Then you refuse, and we part as warriors who respect each other's decisions. Kor's hand rested on his disruptor, casual but present. Though I would caution against relying too heavily on Federation promises. Kirk is an honorable man, but he serves bureaucrats who measure everything in diplomatic protocols and non-interference directives. The Klingon Empire acts. We do not debate. Spock, who had been silently scanning the docking bay with his tricorder, finally spoke. Commander Kor, your rhetoric is persuasive, but incomplete. You have not mentioned that accepting Klingon alliance would immediately place the SDF-1 in opposition to the Federation, the Romulan Empire, and several other major powers. Commander Hunter would be trading his current uncertain position for a guaranteed multi-front conflict. A conflict he is equipped to win. Kor countered. With Klingon support and that vessel's capabilities, he could carve out territory, establish his people as a power in their own right. Is that not preferable to begging Federation charity? Rick looked at Kirk, saw the captain's careful neutrality. Whatever Kirk thought of Kor's offer, he wouldn't pressure or manipulate. The Federation meant what it said about respecting choice and sovereignty, even when that choice might work against Federation interests. The implications spiraled outward in Rick's tactical mind. Klingon alliance meant resources, immediate support, a warrior culture that understood survival combat. But it also meant war, commitment to conflicts that weren't his, transformation from refugee to asset in someone else's imperial ambitions. Federation cooperation meant slower processes, regulations, diplomatic complexity. But it also meant time to understand this universe, options beyond military force, protection without immediate price tags. Or he could reject both, maintain independence, risk isolation but preserve autonomy. 70,000 lives. 18 months of protoculture. A ship that could reshape galactic power balances. Decisions made in docking bays that would echo across decades. Commander Core, Rick said carefully, I appreciate your directness and respect your warrior culture. But I'm not making decisions about alliances on day one in this universe. We need time to understand our situation, assess options, determine what's best for our people, civilian and military. Core's expression shifted through several emotions: disappointment, respect, calculation. A reasonable position, he admitted. Though I warn you, Hunter, in this galaxy, neutrality is a luxury few can afford. Eventually you will choose sides or have sides chosen for you. He glanced at the Veritech fighters one more time, hunger barely suppressed. When that day comes, remember the Klingon Empire offers strength and respect to those worthy of both. I'll remember, Rick promised. The Klingon commander gestured to his warriors, preparing to depart. Then he paused, turning back with a predatory smile. One more thing, Hunter. I would like to see these Veritechs in actual combat, not mere demonstrations. Perhaps a friendly exercise? Klingon fighters against your transformable machines. No live weapons, purely for tactical assessment. Roy grinned before Rick could respond. Commander, anytime you want to see what a Veritech can do against conventional fighters, we're happy to educate you. Roy, Lisa started. No, Commander Hayes, Core interrupted, pleased. Your squadron leader has spirit. I like him. Very well, Fokker. Tomorrow, your Skull Squadron against my best pilots. We will see which warriors are superior. Rick saw the potential disaster forming, but also the opportunity. Demonstrations of capability without actual combat. A chance to measure Klingon tactics and technology. And maybe, if handled correctly, a way to earn respect without committing to alliance. Training exercise only, Rick stipulated. Safety protocols, no live ammunition, supervised by both command teams. Agreed? Core's smile widened. Agreed. This will be glorious. He touched a communicator device. 3 to beam up. The Klingon dissolved into shimmering energy, leaving the docking base suddenly quieter. Rick felt his shoulders relax incrementally, tension bleeding away as immediate crisis passed. Kirk approached, expression carefully neutral. Well handled, Commander. You managed to neither accept nor reject Core's offer while keeping communication open. That's a diplomatic tightrope walk that would impress Federation negotiators. I'm not a diplomat, Captain, Rick said tiredly. I'm a pilot who got promoted too many times and now makes decisions that affect thousands of lives. I just don't want to screw this up. Join the club, McCoy muttered. Jim makes those decisions daily and still claims to be an explorer, not a diplomat. The question is, Spock said, tricorder still active. What happens next? Commander Core will report the SDF-1's existence to the Klingon High Council. They will assess its strategic value and make decisions accordingly. Similarly, Starfleet Command will require detailed reports on this situation. Word will spread. Lisa crossed her arms, strategic mind already calculating cascading consequences. And when word spreads, more factions will come investigating. Some friendly, some hostile, all with their own agendas. That's assuming the Zentraedi don't find us first, Roy added darkly. The Fold accident might have left a trail. If they track us here, this whole quadrant gets a front-row seat to what real warfare looks like. Rick looked at the Veritech fighters standing silent guard, thought of Lin and May singing to maintain morale in the civilian sections, remembered Earth burning under Zentraedi bombardment. They'd survived one impossible war. Now they were trapped in a universe with different rules, different threats, and limited time before their power ran out. "Captain Kirk," Rick said, "I think I need to take you up on that offer. Not Klingon alliance, not yet anyway. But Federation assistance. We need to understand this universe, find a way to sustain our protoculture reserves or develop alternatives, and determine if the Zentraedi can follow us here. Can Starfleet help with that?" Kirk nodded without hesitation. "We can. The Federation has the finest scientific minds, engineers who've solved impossible problems, and resources that could make a difference. But," he paused, choosing words carefully, "I need to be honest about something. The moment I request Starfleet assistance for a vessel of this magnitude with unknown technology, this becomes a matter of Federation security. There will be protocols, investigations, regulations. You'll have help, but you'll also have oversight. Bureaucracy," Roy said with distaste. "Necessary bureaucracy," Kirk countered. "The Federation has faced threats before, beings of immense power, technologies that could devastate civilizations, situations that required careful management. We've learned the hard way that good intentions without proper oversight can lead to catastrophe." Rick understood the subtext. Trust, but verify. Help, but monitor. Alliance, but with strings attached. Still better than isolation. Better than watching protoculture reserves dwindle while 70,000 people waited for answers he couldn't provide alone. "All right," Rick decided. "Contact Starfleet. We'll cooperate with their protocols and investigations. But I want something clear from the start. The SDF-1 remains under my command. We're partners, not subjects. We'll share information and work together, but we make our own decisions about our ship and our people." Kirk extended his hand. "Agreed. Welcome to Federation space, Commander Hunter. Unofficially, anyway. The official part takes more paperwork than you'd believe possible." Rick shook it, sealing an alliance built on mutual need and uncertain trust. Tomorrow, Skull Squadron would face Klingon fighters in mock combat. Soon, Starfleet bureaucrats would arrive with questionnaires and regulations. Eventually, decisions would need to be made about long-term survival, about what happened when protoculture ran out, about whether 70,000 displaced humans could find a place in a universe that had never heard of the Robotech Wars. But tonight they had allies. Uncertain, complicated, bureaucratically burdened allies, but allies nonetheless. It would have to be enough. The mock combat exercise began at dawn, or what passed for dawn in the perpetual starlight of deep space. Rick stood in the SDF-1's flight control center alongside Kirk and Lisa, watching tactical displays as Skull Squadron launched from the primary hangar bay. Roy Fokker's voice crackled over the comm, easy confidence masking razor-sharp focus. "Skull Leader to control. Flight of 6 Veritechs away clean. Sensors show Klingon fighters launching from their cruiser. Looks like they brought a full squadron to make it interesting. On the view screen, 12 Klingon birds of prey detached from their mother ship, smaller craft than the main cruiser, but sleek and predatory, bristling with disruptor banks. They moved with aggressive precision, forming attack patterns that spoke of experienced pilots who'd earned their wings through combat, not simulation." 12-6. Lisa noted. Course stacked the odds in his favor. "He's testing us," Rick said, watching the formations close. "Wants to see how we handle numerical disadvantage." Roy's faced worse. Kirk leaned forward, studying the tactical display with professional interest. "Commander Spock analysis?" The Vulcan, positioned at a borrowed science station, monitored both groups with his tricorder. "The Klingon fighters rely on speed and coordinated strike patterns. They are attempting to use superior numbers to overwhelm and isolate individual targets. Tactically sound against conventional adversaries. But the Veritechs aren't conventional," Rick said. "The Klingon formation split, 6 fighters breaking high while 6 swept low, classic pincer movement designed to catch the Veritechs in crossfire." Roy's response was immediate and completely unexpected. Skull Squadron transformed mid-flight, transitioning from fighter jets to Guardian mode in seconds. The shift in configuration disrupted Klingon targeting solutions, and suddenly the Veritechs weren't where sensors predicted they'd be. "What?" One of the Klingon pilot's confused exclamation cut across the open channel before being silenced by his commander's sharp rebuke. Roy's laughter followed. "Surprise! You wanted to see transformation in combat, Commander Core. Here it is!" The Veritechs in Guardian mode executed maneuvers impossible for standard fighters, rotating mid-flight, changing vectors with leg thrusters while arms tracked targets independently. The Klingon pincer collapsed in confusion as pilots tried to reacquire targets that were suddenly facing backward while moving forward, firing simulated weapons in directions that defied conventional flight dynamics. "Fascinating," Spock murmured. "The transformation provides tactical versatility far exceeding standard aerospace combat doctrine. The Klingon are forced to recalculate engagement parameters mid-battle." "They're not recalculating fast enough," Lisa observed with satisfaction as 2 Klingon fighters registered simulated hits and peeled off, eliminated from the exercise. But Core's pilots adapted quickly. Rick watched them reform, abandoning coordinated patterns in favor of aggressive individual attacks that forced the Veritechs to defend from multiple angles simultaneously. One Klingon pilot executed a suicide run that would have been lethal in real combat, closing to point-blank range before his fighter registered a simulated kill on one of Roy's wingmen. "Skull 3 is down," Roy reported, voice tight with respect for the opponent's boldness. "These guys don't mess around." The dogfight evolved into a 3-dimensional chess match, fighters and Veritechs spiraling through space in patterns that pushed both technologies to their limits. Rick saw Roy switch to Batloid mode for one sequence, the Veritech's fully humanoid configuration allowing it to strafe while dodging, using hands to manipulate its flight path in ways that defied everything the Klingon pilots expected. "They fight like Zentraedi battle pods," one Klingon pilot reported to his commander. "Standing upright, using arms independently. It is unsettling. It is magnificent." Core's voice cut in, raw appreciation evident. "Continue the attack? Show them what Klingon warriors can achieve." The battle raged for 20 minutes before Roy finally called it. "Skull leader to control. Exercise complete. Final tally, 3 Klingon fighters remaining, 3 Veritechs. We're calling it a draw before somebody gets too competitive and forgets this is simulated." "Agreed," Core responded immediately. "Well fought, Fokker. Your machines are everything I hoped and more. When this exercise is finished, we must discuss tactics over blood wine. I have many questions about transformation combat doctrine." As the fighters returned to their respective ships, Kirk turned to Rick with an expression mixing concern and calculation. "Commander, you just demonstrated capabilities that will make every tactical analyst in the quadrant revise their combat assessments. The Klingon will report this to their high command. Within days, everyone will know what your Veritechs can do." "Good," Rick said flatly. "Let them know. Maybe it'll make people think twice before trying to take what's ours by force. Or it will make them more determined to acquire the technology." Spock countered logically. "The Romulan Star Empire, in particular, would find transformable fighters highly advantageous for their tactical doctrine. They may attempt covert acquisition rather than direct confrontation." Lisa's tactical board chimed urgently. She scanned the readout, then looked up sharply. "Speaking of Romulans, we've got a cloak signature at the edge of sensor range. Just a flicker, but it matches the profile Captain Kirk showed us. Someone's been watching." Kirk's expression hardened. "Uhura, signal the Enterprise. Tell them to run active scans for cloaked vessels, full spectrum. And get me a secure channel to Starfleet Command immediately." "Already on it, Captain," Uhura's voice responded through his communicator. The implications crashed down like a collapsing building. Rick had known, intellectually, that demonstrating Veritech capabilities would draw attention. But knowing and experiencing were different things. Within hours of arriving in this universe, the SDF-1 had become a prize that multiple interstellar powers wanted to examine, acquire, or eliminate. "How long before Starfleet sends a delegation?" Rick asked. 2 days at maximum warp, Kirk estimated. Admiral Nogura will want to assess this situation personally. He's cautious but fair. You'll get a hearing, not a judgment. But Commander, you need to understand something. He paused, choosing words carefully. The Federation Council will have concerns. A vessel of this size with weapons technology beyond anything we've encountered, carrying civilians and military personnel, commanded by officers from a timeline where Earth was devastated by alien invasion. Some council members will see you as refugees needing protection. Others will see a potential threat that needs to be contained. Contained, Roy repeated, arriving from the flight deck with his helmet under his arm, sweat still coating his face from the combat simulation. That's a polite word for imprisoned. Not imprisoned, Kirk corrected. Monitored. Regulated. The Federation has protocols for situations like this because we've faced them before. First contact with powerful unknowns, technologies that could destabilize the balance of power, refugees from temporal or dimensional displacement. There are procedures designed to protect everyone involved. Including procedures to confiscate dangerous technology? Lisa asked pointedly. Kirk met her eyes without flinching. If the Federation Council determines that technology poses an existential threat to galactic stability, yes. But that's an extreme measure requiring extensive deliberation and evidence. More likely, they'll propose joint custody arrangements, Federation oversight of weapons systems, integration protocols for your civilian population. Rick felt the walls closing in despite the vast emptiness of space surrounding them. They'd escaped the Zentraedi, survived impossible odds, maintained their independence through years of desperate combat. Now bureaucrats from a government they'd never heard of would decide their fate based on regulations written for situations that couldn't possibly account for the Robotech War's unique circumstances. There has to be another option, Rick said. There is, Spock said quietly. All eyes turned to the Vulcan, who continued in his characteristic measured tone. The Federation's regulations regarding advanced technology and displaced populations assume the subjects lack resources or options. However, the SDF-1 is neither helpless nor powerless. You command a vessel that could, theoretically, operate independently in Federation space or beyond its borders. You possess technology that multiple factions would support in exchange for access or alliance. You're suggesting we play different powers against each other? Lisa said, skepticism evident. I am suggesting, Spock corrected, that you have negotiating leverage the Federation Council will recognize. If you present yourselves as potential partners with alternatives rather than supplicants requiring rescue, the terms of cooperation will be substantially different. Kirk looked at his science officer with something between surprise and approval. Spock, that's remarkably Machiavellian for a Vulcan. It is logical, Captain. Commander Hunter's situation is unique. Applying standard protocols would be inefficient and potentially counterproductive. A negotiated partnership based on mutual benefit serves all parties more effectively than imposed oversight. Rick studied the Vulcan, recognizing the gift being offered. Spock was essentially providing a roadmap for maintaining SDF-1's independence while securing Federation support. Not charity, but alliance. Not protection, but partnership. What would that partnership look like? Rick asked. Joint research initiatives on protoculture technology, Spock outlined. Federation scientists work with your engineers to find sustainable alternatives or develop refinement methods compatible with this universe's physics. In exchange, you share technical data and allow limited Federation presence aboard the SDF-1 for scientific observation. Your civilians receive full Federation citizenship rights and access to support services, but maintain residence aboard your vessel unless they choose otherwise. Your military forces remain under your command but coordinate with Starfleet on mutual security concerns. And the weapons technology? Roy asked. The Veritex, the main gun, all the Robotech systems? Remains proprietary to the SDF-1, Spock said. Though the Federation would likely request non-aggression assurances and possibly limitations on deployment in certain circumstances. Negotiable terms, not mandates. It was more than Rick had dared hope for when they'd materialized in this universe. Not independence. They need Federation resources too desperately for that, but autonomy within Alliance. A chance to preserve what they built while accessing the support necessary for long-term survival. Captain Kirk, Rick said slowly, is what Commander Spock outlined actually achievable? Would the Federation Council accept those terms? Kirk considered for a long moment, then nodded. With the right presentation and enough support from Starfleet Command, yes. Admiral Noguera respects pragmatism over rigid protocol. If we can demonstrate that partnership serves Federation interests better than control, he'll advocate for it. But, his expression turned serious. You'll need to prove yourselves. The Council will want assurances that you're not a threat, that you can be trusted with the autonomy you're requesting. That means transparency, cooperation with investigations, and probably some compromises you won't like. Compromises we can live with, Rick said, or compromises that gut everything we're trying to preserve? That depends on how well you negotiate, Kirk replied honestly, and how much trust you can build in the next few days before Starfleet arrives. The communicator on Lisa's console chirped. She listened briefly, then looked up with tension written across her features. Sensor contact, bearing 273 Mark 5. Romulan warbird decloaking at extreme range. They're hailing us. Rick's tactical instincts screamed warnings. First the Klingon, now Romulans. Every major power in this quadrant was taking an interest in the SDF-1, and not all of them shared the Federation's diplomatic sensibilities. Put them on screen, Rick ordered. The view screen shimmered, revealing a Romulan bridge. Austere, militaristic, dominated by a commander whose features carried the same pointed ears as Spock but with an expression of calculating cunning that the Vulcan would never permit himself. I am Commander Karras of the Romulan Star Empire, the officer said, voice smooth as polished steel. The vessel you command has attracted considerable attention, Commander Hunter. The Empire would very much like to discuss opportunities for mutual benefit. I suggest we meet to explore possibilities that the Federation, with all its regulations and restrictions, cannot offer. Rick looked at Kirk, saw the captain's jaw tighten with concern. The Romulans had arrived, and with them, a whole new level of complication. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous. Commander Karras waited on the view screen with the patience of a predator confident in eventual victory. Behind him, the Romulan bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements suggesting disciplined readiness for whatever response the SDF-1 might offer. Commander Karras, Rick said carefully, this is the first I've heard from the Romulan Star Empire. I'm not sure what opportunities you're referring to. Karras smiled, a thin expression that suggested he found Rick's caution amusing. Of course. You are new to this region of space, unfamiliar with the political landscape. Allow me to clarify. The Federation will offer you protection, resources, scientific assistance. All true. What they will not tell you is that such generosity comes with chains. Federation oversight, Council deliberations, prime directive restrictions that will limit how you defend yourselves or pursue your interests. And the Romulan Empire offers something different. Lisa asked, voice neutral despite the tension radiating through the command center. We offer respect for sovereignty. Karras replied smoothly. The Empire understands that a commander must maintain authority over his vessel and crew without interference from bureaucrats light years away. We would provide technical assistance, resource support, even sanctuary within Romulan space, all without demanding you surrender command or submit to endless regulations. Kirk stepped forward, voice sharp. What Commander Karras isn't mentioning is that Romulan respect for sovereignty historically means manipulating isolated powers into dependencies, then extracting concessions until sovereignty becomes meaningless. The Empire has perfected the art of offering help that becomes a trap. Karras's expression hardened. Captain Kirk speaks from Federation propaganda, not facts. But I will be direct, Commander Hunter, since you strike me as someone who appreciates honesty. Yes, the Romulan Empire would expect reciprocity for our assistance. Your technology interests us, particularly your transformable fighters and the energy source you call protoculture. We would propose a technology exchange, Romulan cloaking devices and weapon systems for access to your innovations. Technology exchange, Spock said quietly to Rick. That would violate the Treaty of Alderaan, which prohibits cloaking technology transfer to Federation vessels or allies. Accepting Romulan assistance would immediately place you in opposition to Federation interests. Rick absorbed that, recognizing the game being played. Kara's was offering power and independence, but accepting would force the SDF-1 into the Romulan sphere of influence and make Federation partnership impossible. A choice disguised as an opportunity. Commander Kara's, Rick said. I appreciate the directness. But we've been in this universe less than 48 hours. Making commitments to any major power before we understand the situation would be premature. I'm sure you can understand the need for caution. Caution is wise. Kara's agreed. But opportunity is fleeting. The Federation will arrive soon with their delegation, their protocols, their restrictions. Once you accept their framework, extracting yourself becomes complicated. I merely suggest you consider alternatives while you still have the freedom to choose. The Romulan commander leaned forward slightly, voice dropping to conspiratorial tones. The Empire has resources the Federation lacks, Commander. We have territory where you could operate without oversight, facilities where your protoculture reserves could be analyzed without Federation scientists demanding access to every system. And if your enemies, these Zentraedi you fought, were to follow you here, the Empire would stand with you without debating prime directives or non-interference protocols. Roy moved closer to Rick, voice low enough that the view-screen audio wouldn't pick it up. Skipper, this smells like every bad deal we turned down from black market suppliers during the war. Too good to be true, delivered with a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Rick nodded fractionally. Roy was right. Kara's was offering exactly what desperate refugees might want to hear, presented with just enough honesty to seem credible while concealing the inevitable costs. Commander Kara's, I need time to consider options and discuss this with my senior staff. When Starfleet arrives, I'll be making no immediate commitments to anyone until I fully understand what each faction is actually offering and what they expect in return. Kara's smile returned, knowing and slightly mocking. A diplomatic answer, Commander Hunter. Captain Kirk has taught you well in the short time you've known him. Very well, I will respect your need for deliberation. But understand something clearly. His expression hardened, all pretense of warmth vanishing. The Romulan Empire is patient, but we do not appreciate being used as leverage in Federation negotiations. If you merely wanted our offer to strengthen your bargaining position with Starfleet, that would be unwise. That's not my intention, Rick said honestly. I genuinely don't know what decision serves my people's best interests yet. When I do know, I'll be direct about it. Kara studied him through the view screen, and Rick felt the weight of that alien intelligence assessing, calculating, deciding whether belief was warranted. Finally, the Romulan commander nodded slowly. I believe you mean that. Good. The Empire respects warriors who speak truth, even when deception might serve them better. He touched controls on his command chair. I am transmitting coordinates for a listening post near the neutral zone. If you decide Federation restrictions become intolerable, contact us there. The offer remains open for precisely 72 hours. After that, the Empire will pursue other interests. The view screen went dark. Moments later, sensors showed the Romulan warbird cloaking and vanishing from detection range. Silence settled over the command center, heavy with implications. Rick turned to find Kirk watching him with an expression mixing approval and concern. You handled that well, the captain said. Kara's was testing whether you could be manipulated through promises or intimidated by time pressure. You passed both tests. Doesn't mean he's gone, Lisa observed, studying sensor displays. He could be maintaining position while cloaked, monitoring our communications, waiting to see what we do next. Assume he is, Kirk agreed. The Romulans are masters of intelligence gathering. Everything you say or do near that warbird's last known position should be considered compromised. Roy dropped into a chair, exhaustion finally showing through his usual confidence. So we've got Klingon wanting warrior alliances, Romulans offering technology deals, and Federation bureaucrats incoming with regulations and oversight. Did I miss anyone? Are the Borg going to show up next? The Borg? Spock's eyebrow rose. How would you know about the Borg, Commander Fokker? Lucky guess based on the pattern, Roy muttered. Universe throws everything at you at once, you start expecting the kitchen sink. Rick moved to the tactical display, studying the positions of known vessels, Enterprise nearby, Klingon cruiser maintaining distance, suspected Romulan warbird location marked with uncertainty brackets. 3 major powers, 3 different approaches, all circling the SDF-1 like sharks scenting blood in the water. Captain Kirk, Rick said quietly, level with me. If I reject both Klingon and Romulan offers and commit to working with the Federation, what are the actual odds that Starfleet lets us maintain real autonomy? Not the negotiated partnership Spock outlined, but the reality after bureaucrats and admirals finish imposing necessary safeguards. Kirk considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, and Rick appreciated the lack of immediate reassurance. Finally, the captain spoke with careful honesty. 70%, maybe 75%. If Admiral Noguera supports the partnership approach and you demonstrate reliability, the Federation Council will likely approve autonomous operation with oversight provisions. But there are Council members who will push for direct Starfleet control of your weapons systems, mandatory Federation officers aboard the SDF-1, restrictions on where you can operate. They'll cite security concerns, precedent, responsibility to protect Federation citizens. And the other 25 to 30%? Lisa asked. Worst case? The Council declares the SDF-1 a strategic asset requiring Federation custody. Your people get integrated into Federation society, the ship gets assigned a Starfleet crew, and you're offered positions within Starfleet command structure. It would be presented as generous asylum, not imprisonment, but the effect would be the same, loss of independence and control. The blunt assessment hit harder than diplomatic evasion would have. Rick felt the familiar weight of impossible choices, the kind he'd faced too many times during the Zentraedi War. Decisions where every option carried costs measured in lives and futures. What would you do? Rick asked Kirk directly. If you were in my position, what choice would you make? Kirk smiled slightly, appreciation for the question evident. I'd do exactly what you're doing. Gather information, assess all parties, and refuse to be rushed into commitments before understanding the full picture. But I'd also... He paused, considering. I'd establish leverage that makes the Federation need my cooperation more than I need their approval. How? Prove you're an asset too valuable to contain, Kirk said simply. The Federation responds to demonstrated benefit. If you can show that the SDF-1's capabilities serve Federation interests better through partnership than control, the Council's calculation changes. They become invested in maintaining your autonomy rather than restricting it. Spock nodded agreement. Logical. The Federation's bureaucratic structure responds to incentives. Modify the incentive structure, and you modify the outcome. Rick looked at Lisa, saw her tactical mind already working through possibilities. What kind of demonstration would shift that calculation? Something significant, she said slowly. Something that proves we're allies worth keeping independent rather than assets worth controlling. A threat the Federation can't handle alone, a problem we're uniquely positioned to solve, a capability that only works if we maintain operational autonomy. The Zentraedi, Roy said suddenly. If they follow us here through the dimensional breach, the Federation gets a front-row seat to what we've been fighting. They see why the SDF-1 was built, why our tactics work, why transformable fighters matter. And they realize that trying to command us through bureaucratic oversight would cripple the effectiveness they need. Kirk's expression shifted to alarm. Commander Fokker, Are you seriously suggesting we wait for a hostile alien invasion to prove your value? I'm suggesting, Roy countered, that if the Zentraedi are coming anyway, and that fold accident definitely left a trail they could follow, then when they arrive, we make damn sure the Federation understands what we bring to the table. Rick felt ice touch his spine. The possibility had haunted him since the fold accident, that the dimensional breach might serve as a beacon, drawing Zentraedi forces through the same rift that had trapped the SDF-1. If that happened, this entire region of space would become a war zone that made the Klingon Federation conflicts look like border skirmishes. But Roy was right about one thing. If the Zentraedi came, if the Federation witnessed what the SDF-1 had been designed to fight, all questions about autonomy and control would become irrelevant. The Federation would need the SDF-1 operating at full effectiveness, which meant accepting Rick's command authority without bureaucratic restrictions. That's a hell of a gamble, Rick said. Everything about this situation is a gamble, Lisa replied. We're betting Federation partnership works out. Betting the Romulans won't steal our technology. Betting the Klingon respect boundaries. Betting our protoculture doesn't run out before we find solutions. At least with the Zentraedi scenario, we'd be playing to our strengths. Spock's tricorder chirped urgently. The Vulcan studied the readout, and his expression, usually controlled to the point of impassiveness, flickered with something approaching concern. Captain, Spock said quietly, I am detecting subspace distortion patterns consistent with dimensional instability. The readings match theoretical profiles for breaches between parallel universes or alternate timelines. The distortions are centered approximately 3 light-years from our current position and appear to be expanding. Rick's blood turned cold. The fold breach. It's still active? Not merely active, Spock corrected. Destabilizing. If the expansion continues at current rates, the breach will become large enough to permit vessel transit within 48 hours. And if something comes through? Kirk asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Then we will discover whether Commander Hunter's warnings about the Zentraedi were accurate, Spock said, and whether this region of space is prepared for contact with a hostile force that devastated Earth in an alternate timeline. Rick looked at the tactical display, at the expanding breach marker Spock had added, at the Federation, Klingon, and Romulan vessels all watching and waiting. 48 hours. Maybe less. Time to prepare for the possibility that the war he thought they'd left behind was about to follow them into a universe completely unprepared for what was coming. The briefing room was packed beyond capacity. Rick stood at the head of the table where holographic projections displayed the dimensional breach's expanding radius, its unstable energy patterns pulsing like a malignant wound in the fabric of space. Around him sat the SDF-1 senior staff alongside representatives from 3 interstellar powers who'd spent centuries as adversaries but now shared a common concern. Captain Kirk occupied one side with Spock and McCoy. Commander Kor had transported aboard with 2 of his officers, their aggressive postures barely contained by diplomatic necessity. And to Rick's carefully controlled surprise, Commander Karras had arrived under flag of truce, his Romulan tactical officer maintaining vigilant watch over everything. Gentlemen, Rick began, suppressing the surreal awareness that he was conducting a strategic briefing for alien commanders from a universe he'd arrived in 3 days ago. Thank you for accepting my invitation. What we're facing requires information sharing that transcends political boundaries. Get to the point, Hunter, Kor rumbled. My warriors grow restless watching that breach expand while we debate. The point, Lisa said sharply, activating tactical displays that showed Zentraedi fleet configurations, is that if what we suspect comes through that breach, this entire sector faces an enemy that makes your current conflicts look like training exercises. The holographic projection shifted, showing a Zentraedi battlecruiser to scale beside the Enterprise, the Klingon battlecruiser, and the Romulan warbird. The size disparity was staggering. The Zentraedi vessel dwarfed all 3 combined, bristling with weapons designed for planetary bombardment and fleet annihilation. Impossible, Karras said flatly. No species builds vessels of that scale. The resource requirements alone are trivial, Rick interrupted. When you've been waging interstellar war for thousands of years and view entire solar systems as resource pools, the Zentraedi aren't explorers or diplomats. They're a manufactured warrior race designed by the Robotech masters for one purpose: conquest and combat on a scale you haven't experienced in this timeline. Spock studied the tactical data with intense focus. Commander Hunter, these specifications indicate weapons output exceeding anything in Federation records. A single vessel of this class could potentially destroy a Constitution-class starship with one sustained barrage. Could and would, Roy confirmed grimly. We've seen it happen. Zentraedi don't negotiate, don't accept surrender, don't show mercy. They identify threats, calculate optimal attack vectors, and execute with mechanical efficiency. The only reason Earth survived was because we had the SDF-1 and learned to use culture as a weapon against their conditioning. Kor leaned forward, predatory interest overriding skepticism. You defeated these giants through culture? Explain. Rick nodded to Lisa, who pulled up battlefield recordings from the Zentraedi War, footage that showed enormous humanoid warriors in power armor, battle pods transforming for different combat roles, fleet formations that blocked out stars. Then the recordings shifted, showing Zentraedi soldiers exposed to human music, human relationships, human individuality. The confusion in their massive features, the breakdown of military discipline, the defections and internal conflicts that had given Earth its only real advantages. The Zentraedi were conditioned to function as perfect soldiers, Lisa explained. No individual identity, no cultural development, no concept of anything beyond military hierarchy and combat doctrine. When they encountered human culture, art, music, love, individual expression, it destabilized their psychological conditioning. Some defected. Others became erratic. Their command structure fractured. A fascinating vulnerability, Kara's observed, though his tone carried calculation rather than sympathy. But also one that suggests these Zentraedi would adapt rapidly once aware of the threat cultural exposure poses. They would implement countermeasures, isolation protocols, possibly even genocide to eliminate the contamination source. That's exactly what they did, Rick said quietly, remembering Earth burning. When their commanders realized human culture was undermining military cohesion, they ordered complete orbital bombardment of Earth's population centers. Billions died in hours. We survived because we were already in space aboard the SDF-1, protecting civilian refugees who'd been accidentally folded with us. Silence settled over the briefing room, heavy with implications. Even Kor, who joked about glorious combat, looked sobered by the casualty numbers. Kirk broke the quiet, voice carrying command authority that transcended ship and uniform. Commander Hunter, what's your assessment? If Zentraedi forces detect the breach and investigate, what are we facing? Rick pulled up probability matrices he and Lisa had worked through during the previous sleepless night. Best case, a scout vessel comes through, detects the SDF-1 signature, and reports back before we can neutralize it. That gives us maybe a week before a full battle group follows. Worst case, a fleet-scale force transits the breach immediately, detects human life across multiple vessels and colonies, and begins systematic elimination operations before we can coordinate a defense. And most likely case? Spock asked. Reconnaissance in force, Lisa answered. 3 to 5 battlecruisers, support vessels, fighter screens. Enough to assess the situation and engage significant resistance, but not so much that they can't withdraw if they encounter unexpected opposition. The Zentraedi are warriors, but they're not stupid. They probe, adapt, and overwhelm. Roy activated combat footage showing Veritech squadrons engaging Zentraedi forces, the desperate maneuvers, transformation tactics, kill ratios that spoke of humanity fighting with everything they had against overwhelming odds. This is what it took to survive. Transformable fighters that could match their battle pods' versatility. Main gun strikes that could take down battlecruisers. Cultural psychological warfare. And even with all that, we barely made it. Kor watched the footage with rapt attention, his warrior's appreciation for combat excellence evident despite the grim context. Your pilots are magnificent. The way they use transformation to create unpredictable attack vectors, the coordination between fighter modes. This is artistry in battle. This is survival, Rick corrected. Every pilot you saw on that footage learned these tactics because hesitation meant death. We lost thousands learning what worked against Zentraedi battle pods. In exchange for what? Kirk asked sharply. Access to protoculture technology? Veritech schematics? Commander Hunter's cooperation with Romulan strategic interests? In exchange for survival. Kara's replied coolly. Captain Kirk, your Federation idealism is admirable, but if these Zentraedi prove half as dangerous as Commander Hunter suggests, political posturing becomes suicidal. The Empire offers capabilities the Federation lacks. Refusing assistance because it comes from traditional adversaries is illogical. Spock's eyebrow rose. Commander Karras, you just argued for logic over political considerations. I find myself in the unusual position of partially agreeing with a Romulan tactical assessment. The Vulcan sees reason, Kor said with dark amusement. As do I. The Klingon Empire does not cower behind cloaking devices and subterfuge, but we recognize worthy enemies and temporary alliances of necessity. If these Zentraedi giants threaten Klingon territory, we will fight them. Coordinating with Hunter's forces increases victory probability. This is acceptable. Rick looked at Kirk, saw the captain processing the same impossible calculation. Three powers that spent most of their existence in conflict or Cold War, now discussing coordinated defense because the alternative was facing an enemy that had already devastated one Earth and wouldn't hesitate to devastate another. We need a unified command structure, Rick said, knowing he was stepping into political territory that would make Starfleet Command's collective heads explode. When the Zentraedi come through, we can't have three separate fleets operating on different tactical doctrines with no coordination. Someone needs overall strategic authority, and everyone else needs to accept that authority without political interference. You volunteer yourself for this role, I assume? Karras said, skepticism evident. No, Rick replied, surprising everyone. I'm suggesting Captain Kirk. He has experience coordinating multi-faction operations, he commands respect from Klingon and Romulan officers, and the Federation's diplomatic infrastructure gives him resources we'll need for logistics and intelligence coordination. The SDF-1 serves as primary assault platform, but Kirk coordinates overall strategy. Kirk stared at him, clearly not expecting that proposal. Commander Hunter, you're offering to subordinate your vessel to my command? After spending days resisting Federation oversight? I'm offering tactical coordination under your strategic direction, Rick clarified. The SDF-1 remains under my operational command, but I'll execute maneuvers that support your overall battle plan. There's a difference between cooperation and surrender. I'm proposing the former. Kor laughed, genuine appreciation in the sound. Clever, Hunter. You maintain autonomy while creating command structure that serves mutual interests. This is warrior politics I can respect. He turned to Kirk. Very well, Captain. If these Zentraedi appear, the Klingon Empire will coordinate our forces with your strategic direction. But understand, we fight for glory and survival, not Federation principles. Our methods may not align with your precious regulations. As long as your methods destroy Zentraedi ships and protect civilian populations, Kirk said carefully, I can accept tactical variations in approach. Karras remained silent longer, calculating with the precision that made Romulan commanders so dangerous. Finally, he nodded slowly. The Empire will participate in coordinated defense operations under Captain Kirk's strategic oversight. However, we retain operational autonomy for our cloaked vessels and special operations. Some capabilities work best without external coordination. Translation. The Romulans would cooperate but keep their intelligence operations independent and probably conduct their own agenda alongside official coordination. Kirk clearly understood that, but nodded acceptance anyway. Half a loaf beats starvation. Then we have provisional agreement, Kirk said, standing with command presence that filled the room. Coordinated defense preparations, unified command structure for Zentraedi engagement, shared intelligence on breach activity. The details will require extensive negotiation, but the framework is established. Spock consulted his tricorder, and his expression shifted to urgent concern. Captain, the dimensional breach just increased expansion rate by 37%. At this acceleration, it will reach critical transit threshold in approximately 18 hours, not 48. 18 hours, Lisa repeated, pulling up revised tactical projections. That changes everything. We don't have time for extensive preparations or coordination drills. Whatever's coming, we face it with what we have now. Rick felt the familiar pre-combat tension settle across his shoulders, the heightened awareness that came before every major engagement during the Zentraedi War. 18 hours to prepare multiple fleets with incompatible technologies and conflicting tactical doctrines to face an enemy that might not even come, or might come in overwhelming force. All right, he said, voice carrying the command authority earned through years of impossible battles. We use the time we have. Enterprise coordinates sensor networks for early detection. Klingon forces position for aggressive intercept if hostiles transit the breach. Romulan vessels maintain cloaked positions for intelligence gathering and potential flanking strikes. The SDF-1 serves as primary fire support and civilian evacuation platform if this goes wrong. And if nothing comes through the breach? Kara's asked. Then we've established coordination protocols and command structures that serve us well for future contingencies, Kirk answered. Either way, the effort isn't wasted. The various commanders stood, the briefing concluded, plans established, countdown begun. As they prepared to return to their respective vessels, Kor paused beside Rick. Hunter, when these Zentraedi come, if they come. I want to see your Veritech pilots in actual combat, not simulation. I want to witness transformation tactics against real enemies. See if your warriors are as magnificent under live fire as they are in training exercises. You might get your wish, Commander, Rick said quietly. Just remember, when you see what we fought to survive, you'll understand why we're not eager to fight it again. Kor's smile was predatory and fierce. That is when warriors prove themselves, Hunter. Not in easy victories, but in desperate battles against overwhelming odds. Today is a good day to die, or to earn glory that will be sung about for generations. The Klingon commander transported back to his vessel, leaving Rick with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. 18 hours, McCoy said softly. Jim, if those things are half as bad as Hunter describes, then we'll face them together, Kirk interrupted. Doctor, return to the Enterprise and prepare sickbay for potential casualties. Commander Spock, I want continuous monitoring of that breach. The moment anything changes, I need to know immediately. As his officers departed, Kirk turned to Rick with an expression mixing concern and determination. Commander, you understand what you've just set in motion? A multi-faction alliance coordinated through improvised command structures to face an enemy that might not even appear? Starfleet Command is going to have opinions about this arrangement. Let them have opinions after we survive, Rick said. Right now, I'm more concerned with making sure there's still a Starfleet Command to complain about procedural violations. Kirk smiled grimly. Fair enough. Let's hope these Zentraedi don't show up. But if they do, then they'll discover that this universe fights back, Rick finished. And that the SDF-1 wasn't the only thing that came through that breach. Our willingness to do whatever it takes to survive came with us. That, Kirk said quietly, is exactly what concerns me. The dimensional breach tore open 17 hours and 43 minutes after Spock's revised prediction. Rick was in the SDF-1's Combat Information Center when alarms screamed across every sensor board simultaneously, a cascading wave of warnings that spoke of reality itself buckling under forces it was never designed to withstand. Massive energy spike! The sensor officer shouted over klaxons. The breach is expanding exponentially, Transition threshold exceeded. On the main view screen, space twisted like fabric caught in invisible hands. Colors that shouldn't exist bled through the tear, dimensional boundaries collapsing as something enormous forced its way through from the other side. The visual distortion made Rick's eyes water, his mind struggling to process geometry that violated three-dimensional physics. Then the first ship emerged. A Zentraedi battlecruiser, 4 kilometers of dark metal and brutal functionality, pushed through the breach with the inevitability of an avalanche. Weapon ports glowed with charging energy. Sensor arrays swept the surrounding space with mechanical precision. And in its wake, 3 more battlecruisers followed, each one accompanied by swarms of smaller vessels, destroyers, frigates, fighter carriers. Count 16 major combatants, Lisa reported, voice tight with controlled fear. Conservative estimate, 400 battle pods, support craft, reconnaissance units. Fleet composition suggests reconnaissance in force with full combat capability. They came prepared for engagement. Rick activated fleet-wide communications, his voice cutting through the chaos on multiple channels simultaneously. All vessels, this is Hunter. Zentraedi fleet transit confirmed. Execute defensive plan Alpha. Enterprise coordinates sensor sharing, Klingon forces to intercept positions, Romulan vessels maintain stealth posture. SDF-1 is moving to primary fire position. Acknowledged. Kirk's voice came back immediately, calm despite the crisis. Enterprise is relaying tactical data to all Allied vessels. Spock is analyzing Zentraedi sensor patterns and movement protocols. Core's transmission carried savage eagerness. Finally! A worthy enemy! Klingon attack wings are moving to engage. Let us see if these giants bleed as easily as they intimidate. Kara said nothing, but sensors showed 3 Romulan warbirds decloaking at strategic positions around the Zentraedi fleet's flanks, their plasma torpedo launchers already charging. The lead Zentraedi battlecruiser completed its transit and immediately began broadcasting on multiple frequencies. The transmission was audio-visual, showing the bridge of an alien warship where 50-foot-tall humanoid warriors operated stations designed for their enormous scale. The commander who appeared on screen wore ornate armor that designated high rank, and his face carried the same emotionless calculation Rick remembered from too many nightmares. Attention vessels of unknown configuration, the Zentraedi commander said in heavily accented but comprehensible English. They'd learned human language during the war. You harbor the fugitive vessel Super Dimension Fortress 1. Surrender the ship and all human personnel aboard it immediately, or be eliminated as obstacles to our retrieval mission. Rick felt ice settle in his gut. They hadn't come through the breach by accident or curiosity. They'd tracked the SDF-1 specifically, followed the dimensional trail with the same relentless determination that had pursued them across the solar system in his original timeline. This is Commander Rick Hunter of the SDF-1. Rick transmitted back. We're not surrendering. And you're not in the universe you think you are. Stand down before you start a war you don't understand. The Zentraedi commander's expression didn't change. No surprise, no anger, just cold assessment. Your location is irrelevant. The Robotech Masters required the SDF-1 and its protoculture systems. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. You have witnessed our fleet strength. Compliance is your only rational option. He's not bluffing, Roy said from the tactical station. That's a full battle group, enough firepower to sterilize a planet. They're playing this by their doctrine. Demonstrate overwhelming force, demand surrender, execute if refused. Kirk's face appeared on a secondary comm screen, urgent concern evident. Commander Hunter, that fleet could devastate this entire sector. If they're willing to use planetary bombardment tactics. They are. Rick interrupted. Captain, you need to evacuate all nearby colonies and outposts immediately. If we can't stop them here, they'll systematically eliminate every human settlement they can detect. That's what they did to Earth. The Zentraedi commander apparently tired of waiting for response. You have 1 minute to begin SDF-1 shutdown procedures and prepare for boarding operations. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of all vessels currently defending you, followed by the SDF-1's forced capture. Your allies cannot protect you. Resistance is futile. Kor's laughter exploded across the comm channel. Futile? I will show you futile, giant. Klingon attack wings, engage at will. For the Empire and eternal glory. 12 Klingon birds of prey broke formation and accelerated toward the Zentraedi fleet, disruptors firing in coordinated volleys. The energy weapons splashed across Zentraedi shields, scoring hits but failing to penetrate the defensive barriers. Return fire was immediate and devastating. Particle beams that tracked with perfect accuracy, photon equivalents that struck with fusion-level detonations. 2 Klingon fighters vanished in explosions so bright the view screen automatically dampened to protect against retinal damage. The remaining 10 scattered, executing evasive patterns that would have been impossible for most species to survive. They regrouped, adapted, came in from new vectors with disruptors set to maximum intensity. Klingon tactics are aggressive but ineffective. Spock's voice cut through the chaos, clinical analysis delivered while battle raged. Zentraedi shields appear resistant to standard disruptor frequencies. Modulating to alternating frequencies might, yes, that Klingon wing just achieved partial penetration. They're adapting quickly. The Romulan warbirds struck from 3 different angles simultaneously, plasma torpedoes lancing through space with emerald brilliance. The coordinated strike overwhelmed defensive fire on one Zentraedi destroyer, torpedoes punching through shields and ripping into the hull. The vessel hemorrhaged atmosphere and debris, listing hard to port as secondary explosions rippled across its superstructure. First blood to the Romulans. Kara's voice carried cold satisfaction. All warbirds, continue hit and fade tactics. Do not allow them to track and target our cloaked positions. The Zentraedi fleet responded with terrifying efficiency. Battle pods launched in waves. Hundreds of transformable mecha that shifted between flight and combat configurations with the same versatility as Veritex. They swarmed toward the attacking forces in coordinated formations that spoke of thousands of years' worth of combat doctrine refinement. Skull Squadron, launch! Rick ordered. All Veritech wings, engage battle pods and protect allied vessels. Show them what transformation combat looks like when humans do it. Roy's voice came back fierce and focused. Skull leader away. All wings, remember your training, these aren't simulations anymore. Fight smart, fight fast, and come home alive. The Veritech screamed out of the SDF-1's launch bays, transforming mid-flight as they hit open space. Guardian mode gave them maneuverability advantages against the Zentraedi battle pods, arms and legs providing thrust vectoring that conventional fighters couldn't match. The two forces met in a furball of energy weapons, missiles, and close-quarters maneuvering that turned the space between fleets into a three-dimensional combat zone of incredible complexity. Rick watched tactical displays as Roy led Skull Squadron through maneuvers they perfected during the Zentraedi War. Transform to Batloid, use full articulation to track multiple targets, saturate a zone with missile fire, transform back to fighter mode for high-speed repositioning. The Zentraedi battle pods attempted to match the tactics, but their pilots had never faced enemies who used transformation with such fluidity and creativity. Enterprise is engaging with phaser banks, Kirk reported, his ship moving into firing position alongside the SDF-1. Targeting Zentraedi destroyer escorts. Spock recommends concentrated fire on individual targets rather than distributed damage across multiple vessels. Agreed, Rick said, watching the Enterprise's phaser arrays light up with sustained bursts. The beams struck Zentraedi shields with impressive power, and Rick saw shield generators on the target vessel begin overloading under the sustained assault. Lisa, bring main gun to firing readiness. We need to show them the SDF-1 isn't just a prize to be captured, it's a weapon that can hurt them badly. Main gun charging, Lisa confirmed, her hands dancing across controls with practiced precision. Power systems at 70% and climbing. 90 seconds to full charge. The Zentraedi commander's face reappeared on screen, and for the first time, Rick saw emotion break through the stoic facade, calculation shifting to something approaching concern. You possess reflex weaponry. That confirms SDF-1 identity. All vessels, priority target is the fortress. Eliminate escort forces and disable that ship's main weapon before it achieves firing status. Suddenly, the entire Zentraedi fleet reoriented, battlecruisers bringing their heaviest weapons to bear on the SDF-1. Energy signatures spiked across the board as they prepared synchronized bombardment that would overwhelm even the fortress's formidable shields. Incoming fire! The tactical officer shouted. Multiple battlecruisers targeting our position. Impact in 15 seconds. Pinpoint barrier system to full defensive mode. Rick ordered. Redirect all power from non-essential systems to shields. Brace for impact. The SDF-1 shuddered as the first wave of Zentraedi fire struck home. The pinpoint barrier, mobile shield emitters that could concentrate defensive power on specific impact zones, flashed brilliant blue-white as it caught and redirected incoming energy. But there were too many impacts, too much firepower concentrated on a single target. Hull breaches reported from sections 17 through 23. Structural integrity warnings screamed. The civilian sections, those thousands of refugees who'd survived one war only to face another, were in danger if the bombardment continued. Main gun at 95% charge, Lisa reported, voice steady despite the ship bucking under sustained fire. 50 seconds to optimal firing window. Kirk's Enterprise swept in from an unexpected vector, interposing itself between the SDF-1 and two of the attacking battlecruisers. Phasers and photon torpedoes fired in rapid succession, drawing fire away from the fortress at tremendous risk to the smaller Constitution-class vessel. Enterprise taking heavy damage! McCoy's voice cut through background explosions. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 7. We need to fall back. Negative, Kirk replied sharply. Maintain position. The SDF-1 needs time to fire. Enterprise holds. 3 Klingon birds of prey joined the defensive screen, their smaller profiles making them harder targets as they wove through Zentraedi fire. Disruptors hammered at battlecruiser shields with ferocious intensity. Kor's voice cut through the chaos, singing what could only be a Klingon battle anthem as his ship took hit after hit but refused to break formation. The Romulan warbird struck from concealment again, plasma torpedoes slamming into the rear shields of the lead Zentraedi battlecruiser. This time, the coordinated strike achieved what individual attacks couldn't: shield collapse. The torpedoes punched through to the hull itself, tearing into engine sections and weapon mounts. Main gun fully charged, Lisa announced. Firing solution locked. Fire! Rick commanded. The SDF-1's primary weapon, a reflex cannon powered by protoculture and capable of output that dwarfed anything in Federation or Klingon arsenals, discharged with reality-bending force. The beam was massive, coherent, and utterly devastating. It struck the damaged Zentraedi battlecruiser dead center, overwhelming what remained of its shields and burning through armor like paper before a blowtorch. The battlecruiser's structure couldn't withstand the energy transfer. Its hull superheated, buckled, then exploded outward in a detonation that registered as a small star on every sensor in the system. Debris and radiation scattered across thousands of kilometers. Of the 4-kilometer warship, nothing remained but expanding plasma and fragments. Silence fell across all comm channels for 3 heartbeats. Then Kor's voice returned, awed and exultant. By Collis! That was magnificent! Hunter, your weapon is the most glorious thing I have ever witnessed. The surviving Zentraedi commander stared at the dissipating explosion, and Rick saw genuine shock register on those alien features. The giants had assumed technological superiority. They'd expected to overpower through numbers and firepower. They hadn't expected to encounter weapons that could annihilate their capital ships with single shots. All vessels, withdraw to rally point 7. The Zentraedi commander ordered, tactical assessment overriding pride. They'd won this engagement, but the cost was visible in damaged ships, depleted reserves, and the knowledge that this was only the opening move in a larger conflict. 70,000 civilians depending on his decisions. Allied fleets that had fought alongside the SDF-1 but might become competitors for its technology. Protoculture reserves bleeding away with every shot. And somewhere through that dimensional breach, more Zentraedi forces waited, now knowing exactly what they faced. The demonstration Kirk had wanted, proof that the SDF-1 was an asset worth preserving autonomous, had been delivered in the most dramatic way possible. Now they had to survive the consequences. The War Council convened 12 hours after the Zentraedi withdrawal, assembled in the SDF-1's primary briefing theater with the scorched smell of battle damage still lingering in recycled air. Rick stood before holographic projections showing updated tactical assessments, facing representatives from 3 interstellar powers who just witnessed what Zentraedi warfare truly meant. Captain Kirk sat with visible injuries, a cut above his left eye, burns on his hands from emergency damage control. But his command presence remained undiminished. Commander Spock's uniform was pristine despite the Enterprise's battering, though his tricorder showed continuous activity as he analyzed combat data. Dr. McCoy hovered nearby, medical scanner occasionally sweeping over Kirk despite the captain's irritated waves of dismissal. Commander Kor looked positively energized by combat, his armor scored with near misses but his expression radiating fierce satisfaction. 2 of his officers hadn't survived the engagement, their birds of prey destroyed in the opening exchanges, but Klingon culture apparently processed loss through celebration of glorious death rather than mourning. Commander Karras appeared troubled, his calculating demeanor shaken by witnessing weapons and tactics that exceeded Romulan intelligence projections. The strategic implications of the SDF-1's main gun clearly preoccupied his analytical mind. Preliminary damage assessment, Lisa reported, pulling up statistics that made Rick's chest tighten. SDF-1 suffered hull breaches in civilian sections 12 through 18. Casualties, 43 dead, 117 injured. Structural integrity compromised in forward sections. Pinpoint barrier system operating at 70% efficiency due to emitter damage. Main gun functional but requiring recalibration before next discharge. Enterprise status, Kirk added, voice carrying the weight of command decisions measured in lives. 27 crew dead, 68 injured. Primary hull breach is sealed. Shield generators operating at partial capacity. Warp drive offline pending repairs. Estimate 72 hours before we're combat ready again. Kor's report was characteristically blunt. 4 birds of prey destroyed, 2 heavily damaged, 6 operational but depleted. 137 Klingon warriors earned entrance to SDF-1 through glorious combat. Their deaths were not in vain. We tested the enemy and found them worthy of our steel. 3 warbids operational, Karras said quietly. 1 sustained critical damage and is withdrawing to Romulan space for repairs. Casualties, 96 personnel. Intelligence assessment, the Zentraedi combat doctrine is more sophisticated than initial projections suggested. They adapted to our tactics within minutes of engagement. The casualty numbers hung heavy in the recycled air. Nearly 400 beings dead across all vessels, hundreds more injured, ships damaged or destroyed, all in an engagement that lasted less than 30 minutes. And this had been the Zentraedi probing their defenses, not a full-scale assault. Sensor analysis indicates the Zentraedi fleet has withdrawn to a position 3.7 light-years from the dimensional breach, Spock reported. They are maintaining defensive formation and appear to be conducting damage assessments similar to ours. However, I am detecting increased energy readings from the breach itself. The dimensional instability is expanding, and subspace analysis suggests additional transit events are probable within 48 to 96 hours. Reinforcements, Roy said grimly from his position near the tactical displays. They're calling in more ships. That first battle group was just the advance force. Rick studied the holographic projections showing Zentraedi fleet disposition, comparing it to patterns he'd learned during years of desperate combat. They'll commit a full armada next time, maybe 20 to 30 capital ships, full fighter complements, support vessels. Standard Zentraedi doctrine after encountering unexpected resistance. Withdraw, analyze, then return with overwhelming force designed to eliminate all opposition in a single engagement. Overwhelming force, Kirk repeated. Commander Hunter, can the Allied fleet as currently constituted survive engagement with 30 Zentraedi battlecruisers? The question deserved honesty, not reassurance. Rick met Kirk's eyes directly. No. Not with conventional tactics and our current damage state. The SDF-1's main gun can eliminate individual targets, but we're limited by firing rate and protoculture consumption. Your Federation vessels are powerful but not designed for sustained fleet combat against opponents with superior firepower. The Klingon and Romulan forces are effective but numerically insufficient. Then we need to change the tactical parameters, Lisa said, activating new projections that showed the dimensional breach and surrounding space. We can't win through direct fleet engagement. But we might be able to win by eliminating their ability to bring reinforcements through the breach. Spock's eyebrow rose with immediate comprehension. You propose destabilizing the dimensional rift itself, preventing additional Zentraedi vessels from transiting while forcing the existing fleet to engage with finite resources. Exactly, Lisa confirmed. The breach is already unstable. Spock's analysis indicates it's held open by exotic energy signatures, probably Zentraedi fold system residue from their transit. If we can introduce sufficient counter-frequency disruption, we might be able to collapse the breach entirely. Trapping the current Zentraedi fleet in our universe, Kara said, tactical mind immediately grasping implications. They would be cut off from reinforcement and resupply. A siege scenario favoring defenders with established infrastructure. Kor laughed, appreciation evident. Trap them here and bleed them through attrition. Yes, this is strategy worthy of respect. But, his expression turned serious. Collapsing dimensional breaches sounds like extraordinarily dangerous physics. What are the risks? Substantial, Spock admitted. Uncontrolled dimensional collapse could create subspace shockwaves affecting this entire sector. Worst-case scenarios include temporary disruption of warp capability within several light-years, sensor interference lasting weeks, or catastrophic spatial distortions that make the region permanently hazardous to navigation. And if we don't collapse it? McCoy challenged. We let unlimited Zentraedi reinforcements pour through until they've got enough firepower to steamroll everything in the sector? The Doctor presents the core dilemma accurately, Spock said. We must weigh certain tactical advantage against potential strategic catastrophe. Rick studied the breach projections, remembering the fold accident that had brought them here. The disorientation, the spatial distortion, 70,000 civilians transported across the solar system in an instant because they'd been caught in the dimensional wake. Deliberately destabilizing a breach of this magnitude meant playing with forces they barely understood. But the alternative was watching more Zentraedi fleets arrive until the defensive coalition was simply overwhelmed through numbers. How would we execute the collapse? Rick asked Spock directly. The Vulcan pulled up technical schematics showing the breach's energy structure. The dimensional rift is maintained by what I theorize to be fold space resonance, sustained energy patterns that prevent natural collapse. Introducing counter-resonance frequencies of sufficient amplitude should disrupt the stabilizing patterns. The SDF-1's main gun, if properly calibrated, could generate the necessary energy discharge. You want to shoot the dimensional breach, Roy said slowly. Use the reflex cannon to basically slam the door on the Zentraedi's reinforcement route. Crude analogy, but essentially accurate, Spock confirmed. Kirk leaned forward, command decision crystallizing. Commander Hunter, this is ultimately your call. The SDF-1 possesses the weapon system required for the attempt. The risks affect everyone present, but your vessel and crew would bear the primary operational burden. What's your decision? Rick looked at Lisa, saw her nod of agreement. They'd discussed this possibility during the sleepless hours after the battle. He looked at Roy, saw grim acceptance in his friend's expression. Skull Squadron would fly whatever mission was necessary, no matter how dangerous. He thought of Lin Mei singing in the civilian sections, maintaining morale for refugees who'd already lost one Earth and now faced losing the fragile sanctuary they'd built aboard the SDF-1. Thought of the thousands of families who depended on his decisions to keep them alive one more day. We do it, Rick decided. We collapse the breach and trap the Zentraedi fleet on this side. But I want contingencies in place, evacuation protocols for nearby colonies, emergency warp-out plans for all Allied vessels, sensor buoys positioned to detect if the collapse creates worse problems than it solves. Agreed, Kirk said immediately. The Federation will coordinate civilian evacuations within the potential danger zone. Commander Karras, can Romulan intelligence networks provide advance warning if Zentraedi forces detect our preparations? Karras nodded slowly. The Empire's cloaked observation posts will monitor Zentraedi fleet activity. If they begin moving toward the breach before you're ready to execute, we will provide warning. However, he paused, choosing words carefully. The Empire requires assurance that whatever strategic advantages emerge from this operation will be shared equitably among all participants. You want access to dimensional collapse data, Spock said flatly. Technology that could potentially be weaponized against Federation or Klingon interests. We want, Karras corrected, assurance that the Federation doesn't monopolize whatever scientific discoveries emerge from this unprecedented situation. The Romulan Star Empire contributed vessels and lives to this defense. We expect appropriate recognition. Rick saw the old political tensions surfacing even as they prepared for desperate gambit against mutual enemy. Federation distrust of Romulan motives, Romulan suspicion of Federation expansion, both sides maneuvering for advantage even while cooperating against existential threat. Here's what I'll commit to, Rick said, cutting through the developing argument. All scientific data from the breach collapse attempt gets shared equally among all participating powers, Federation, Klingon Empire, Romulan Star Empire, and the SDF-1. No one gets preferential access or classified advantages. We're in this together, we share the risks, we share the knowledge. Agreed? The simple directness seemed to catch everyone off guard. Kirk recovered first, nodding approval. The Federation accepts those terms. Kor grinned. The Klingon Empire as well. Let the scientists argue about subspace frequencies. Warriors care about victory, not theoretical advantages. Karras studied Rick for a long moment, then inclined his head fractionally. Acceptable. The Empire agrees to equal knowledge sharing regarding dimensional phenomena. Though I suspect Romulan scientists will extract more practical applications than our counterparts. Probably, Rick agreed. But that's competitive advantage through competence, not information monopoly. I can live with that. Spock pulled up technical schematics showing the proposed firing solution. Commander Hunter, the main gun will require precise calibration to generate counter-resonance frequencies rather than standard destructive discharge. I will need direct access to your protoculture generation systems and weapon control interfaces to calculate proper parameters. Lisa bristled slightly. Commander Spock, those systems are essential to mission success. Rick interrupted gently. Lisa, we just committed to equal knowledge sharing. That means letting Federation science officers poke around in our most classified systems. It's what partnership actually looks like when you strip away the diplomatic language. She held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded acceptance. All right. I'll escort Commander Spock to the main gun control center personally. But the protoculture core itself remains restricted. We still don't fully understand how it works, and I won't risk destabilizing our only power source. Understood and acceptable, Spock said. I will work within the parameters you establish. Kirk stood, command presence filling the briefing theater. Then we have our plan. The Enterprise will coordinate defensive fleet positioning and civilian evacuation operations. Klingon forces will maintain ready intercept status in case the Zentraedi attack before we're prepared. Romulan intelligence will provide early warning and strategic reconnaissance. The SDF-1 will prepare the main gun for dimensional breach collapse. Execution timeline? 36 hours minimum. Spock estimated. The weapon calibrations are extraordinarily complex, and miscalculation could produce catastrophic results. I will not recommend firing until I am confident the parameters are correct. 36 hours, Rick repeated, during which the Zentraedi could receive reinforcements, detect our preparations, or simply decide to attack with their current forces. We're gambling they'll wait for additional assets before engaging again. They will wait, Roy said with grim certainty. I've fought these bastards long enough to know their doctrine. They committed a reconnaissance battle group, it got bloodied, and now they're calling for overwhelming force before the next engagement. Zentraedi commanders don't repeat mistakes. They escalate until the problem is eliminated. Then we use their doctrine against them, Kirk said. We let them think they have time to gather strength while we prepare to cut off their reinforcement route. When they're ready to attack, they'll discover their numerical advantage has become a strategic liability. Kor rose, his massive frame radiating battle-ready energy. A trap worthy of the greatest tactical minds. I approve of this plan, though I confess disappointment we will not face 30 battlecruisers in glorious combat. Collapsing dimensional breaches lacks the personal glory of ship-to-ship battle. If this works, McCoy said dryly, you'll get plenty of personal glory fighting the Zentraedi forces already here. 15 capital ships should provide ample opportunity for Klingon courage. Indeed they will, Doctor. Indeed they will. Kor touched his communicator. This is Commander Kor to all Klingon vessels. Maintain battle stations and prepare for extended combat operations. Today we fight alongside unlikely allies against magnificent enemies. It is a good day for Klingon. As the various commanders prepared to return to their vessels, Kirk approached Rick privately, voice low enough for relative privacy. Commander Hunter, you're handling interstellar politics with remarkable skill for someone who arrived in this universe less than a week ago. Natural talent or desperate adaptation? Rick smiled tiredly. Combination of both, probably. Plus, I've spent years making impossible decisions with incomplete information while people's lives hung in the balance. Adding alien species and dimensional breaches to the mix doesn't fundamentally change the process. Assess options, choose the least bad alternative, execute with conviction. That's a remarkably pragmatic command philosophy, Kirk observed. The Federation could use more officers who think that way. Have you given thought to what happens after this crisis resolves? Assuming we all survive, I mean. One crisis at a time, Captain, Rick said. Right now, I'm focused on collapsing that breach, dealing with the trapped Zentraedi fleet, and keeping 70,000 civilians alive. The long-term future can wait until we've secured a short-term one. Kirk nodded understanding. Fair enough. But when the time comes for those long-term conversations, I hope you'll remember that the Federation values allies who demonstrate competence, courage, and integrity. You've shown all three. And the Federation still wants access to protoculture technology, Veritech schematics, and the SDF-1 strategic capabilities. Rick countered without rancor. Let's not pretend politics disappeared just because we're fighting together. I wouldn't dream of it, Kirk replied with a slight smile. But politics don't preclude genuine respect, Commander. You've earned mine, and I suspect you've earned Starfleet's as well. When Admiral Nogura arrives, which he will, probably within days of this battle's conclusion, you'll have powerful advocates for whatever autonomy arrangements you're seeking. Rick studied the Enterprise captain, seeing both the diplomat and the warrior, the explorer and the pragmatist. Kirk embodied the Federation's complexity, idealistic principles balanced against practical necessities, peaceful intentions backed by capable weapons, respect for sovereignty tempered by security concerns. I'll remember that, Captain. And for what it's worth. If we survive this and the Federation's offer includes genuine partnership rather than disguised control, I think the SDF-1 could find a place in this universe. Maybe even a home. That's all anyone can ask, Kirk said quietly. A chance to find home after everything you've lost. The Federation might be bureaucratic, regulation-bound, and frustratingly slow to make decisions, but we're also good at providing sanctuary for those who need it. We'll see this through together, Commander. One crisis at a time. As Kirk transported back to the Enterprise, Rick turned to find Lisa and Roy waiting. 36 hours to save the universe, Roy said. No pressure or anything. We've had worse odds, Lisa replied. Remember the Battle of Saturn's Rings? We were outnumbered 50-1 with damaged engines and half our fighters offline. We still pulled it off. Rick looked at the tactical display showing the distant Zentraedi fleet, the unstable dimensional breach, the scattered Allied vessels preparing for desperate gambit. 50-1 odds had been terrible. These were worse. But they were also surrounded by allies this time: Federation, Klingon, Romulan forces, all committed to the same objective. Not perfect allies, not always trustworthy allies, but allies nonetheless. Maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. All right, Rick said, command authority settling across his shoulders like familiar armor. Let's go shoot a hole in reality and see what happens. How much worse could it get? Roy and Lisa both stared at him. Skipper, Roy said slowly, you just tempted fate so hard I think the universe felt it. 36 hours, Lisa agreed. Let's hope nothing else goes catastrophically wrong before then. Rick smiled despite himself. Where's your sense of adventure? Lost somewhere between the Zentraedi war and dimensional displacement, Lisa replied. But I'll settle for professional competence and survival instinct. Those work too, Rick agreed. Let's get to work. The countdown stood at 4 hours when everything went wrong. Rick was in the main gun control center with Spock, watching the Vulcan science officer make microscopic adjustments to firing parameters, when alarms screamed across every sensor board simultaneously. The familiar klaxon pattern, the one that meant incoming attack, sent adrenaline surging through his system before conscious thought caught up. Zentraedi fleet is moving! The tactical officer's voice cut through the command channel. All capital ships accelerating toward our position. ETA 23 minutes at current velocity. Rick's stomach dropped. They weren't ready. The main gun calibration was incomplete, the Allied fleet still recovering from the first engagement, evacuation protocols only half executed. The Zentraedi should have waited for reinforcements. That was their doctrine, their pattern, their predictable strategic approach. Except they hadn't. Spock, how much longer until firing solution is complete? The Vulcan's fingers never stopped moving across the control interface, even as he answered with characteristic precision. Minimum 3.7 hours. The counter-resonance frequencies require exact calibration or the discharge could destabilize subspace throughout this entire region. Attempting to fire prematurely would be catastrophically dangerous. I got it, Rick interrupted, mind already racing through tactical alternatives. But if the Zentraedi reach firing range before we're ready, there won't be anything left to worry about destabilizing. Options? We could delay them. Lisa's voice came through from the bridge. Hit them hard enough in the opening exchange to force tactical reassessment. Make them think twice about pressing the attack. Or we lead them away from the breach, Roy suggested over the squadron channel. Draw them into pursuit, buy time for Spock to finish calibrations. Kirk's face appeared on the comm screen, his expression grim. Enterprise sensors show why they're moving early. The dimensional breach is experiencing massive energy fluctuations. Something's coming through from the other side. The Zentraedi detected it before we did and are moving to support whatever's transiting. Spock's tricorder chirped urgently. Confirmed. Energy signatures consistent with multiple large mass transit events. I estimate 6 to 8 additional Zentraedi capital ships will emerge within the next 40 minutes. If they join the existing fleet before we collapse the breach, then we're facing combined arms assault with overwhelming numerical superiority. Rick finished. And all our defensive preparations become meaningless. The holographic tactical display updated, showing the Zentraedi fleet's approach vector, and the breach's increasing instability. Reinforcements arriving in 40 minutes. Enemy fleet reaching firing range in 23. Weapon calibration requiring 3.7 hours. The mathematics of survival didn't work. No matter how Rick calculated, the numbers refused to balance. "All right," he said, voice carrying command authority that cut through rising panic. "New plan. We can't wait for perfect calibrations, we fire with what we've got." "Spock, what happens if you shoot the breach with current parameters?" The Vulcan's expression shifted fractionally. The closest thing to alarm Rick had seen on those controlled features. "Commander, the margin for error is unacceptably high. Current calibrations have only 63.4% probability of achieving desired collapse effect. Alternative outcomes include partial collapse creating permanent spatial distortion, cascade failure expanding the breach, or subspace shockwave eliminating all vessels within 5 light-years. And if we don't fire at all?" The Zentraedi reinforcements transit successfully, combine with existing forces, and overwhelm all defensive capabilities through superior firepower and numbers. Probability of Allied fleet survival, less than 12%. Rick looked at Lisa, saw his own grim calculation reflected in her eyes. 63% chance of success versus 12% chance of survival. Not good odds either way, but one at least offered possibility of victory rather than guaranteed defeat. "Captain Kirk," Rick transmitted, "I'm going to fire on the breach with incomplete calibrations. 63% success probability. I recommend all Allied vessels move to minimum safe distance. Spock estimates 5 light-years for absolute safety, but anything beyond 2 light-years should reduce catastrophic shockwave risk." Silence stretched across the channel for 3 heartbeats. Then Kirk's voice returned, steady despite the impossible situation. "Enterprise isn't withdrawing, Commander. We'll maintain defensive position and engage the Zentraedi fleet to give you clear firing solution on the breach. Whatever happens, we see this through together. The Klingon Empire does not flee from glorious battle." Kor's voice boomed through the calm. "We will stand with you, Hunter. If today is the day we enter SDF-1, we enter it as warriors facing impossible odds. There is no greater honor." Even Kara's measured tones carried grim determination. "The Romulan Star Empire has committed resources to this operation. We will not abandon strategic investment merely because probabilities become unfavorable. Our warbids will provide flanking support during your firing sequence." Rick felt something unexpected, gratitude mixed with fear. These aliens from cultures he barely understood, from a universe he'd arrived in less than a week ago, were choosing to risk annihilation rather than abandon an alliance forged in desperate combat. "All Allied vessels," Rick transmitted. "The SDF-1 appreciates your courage and commitment. We'll make this shot count. If something goes wrong, then we die together defending what matters." Kirk interrupted. "No speeches necessary, Commander. Just make the shot." The Zentraedi fleet closed to 18 minutes from firing range. The dimensional breach pulsed with increasing violence as massive energy signatures built toward transit threshold. On the SDF-1's bridge, 70,000 civilians waited in shelters and reinforced sections, trusting that the officers they'd followed through one impossible war could guide them through another. "Lisa, bring the main gun to full charge," Rick ordered. "All power from non-essential systems. I want maximum output on this shot." "Charging now," Lisa confirmed. "Protoculture reserves at 42% and falling. This will drain us to critical levels." "Then we better make it work the first time," Roy said, Skull Squadron forming defensive screen around the SDF-1. "Because we're not getting a second chance." Spock worked with focused intensity, adjusting parameters even as the weapon charged. "I am incorporating real-time breach analysis into final calculations. Success probability now 67.2%. Still unacceptably low, but improving." "Enterprise engaging Zentraedi Vanguard," Kirk reported, his ship's phasers lighting up space as the first enemy destroyers came into range. "Drawing their fire. You have your window, Commander Hunter." The SDF-1's main gun reached full charge, protoculture energy contained in magnetic bottles and exotic matter configurations that strained the laws of physics. The weapon's power output exceeded anything else in the sector. Enough destructive force to vaporize planets, crack moons, or in this case, attempt to seal a dimensional breach through brute force energy application. "Firing solution locked," Lisa announced. "Target, dimensional breach epicenter. Waiting for your command." Rick studied the tactical display one final time. Enterprise and Klingon forces engaging the Zentraedi fleet, buying precious seconds. Romulan warbids positioned for emergency extraction if everything collapsed. The breach itself pulsing with building energy as reinforcements prepared to transit. And the SDF-1, weapon charged and ready, about to attempt something no one in this universe had ever tried. 67% chance of success. 33% chance of catastrophic failure that would kill everyone in the sector. But certainty of defeat if they did nothing. "All hands brace for main gun discharge," Rick transmitted across all channels. "This is for everyone who didn't make it this far. For Earth. For the future. For the chance to build something better than endless war." He looked at Spock, who nodded readiness. At Lisa, who had her hand on the firing control. At Roy's fighter squadron holding position against impossible odds. Fire. The SDF-1's main gun discharged with reality-warping force. The beam was massive, coherent, and precisely calibrated to counter resonance frequencies that Spock had calculated in desperate hours while battle raged. It crossed the distance to the dimensional breach in microseconds, faster than light, carried on exotic particles that ignored conventional physics. The beam struck the breach epicenter exactly where Spock had predicted maximum effect. For one eternal moment, nothing happened. Then the dimensional rift screamed. Space itself convulsed as competing energies, fold space resonance versus counter-resonance disruption, fought for dominance. The breach expanded violently, edges tearing wider as if reality was fabric being ripped apart. Energy signatures spiked beyond sensor capacity to measure. "It's not working!" someone shouted over the command channel. "The breach is expanding, not collapsing." But Spock's voice cut through panic with Vulcan certainty. "Negative. The expansion is temporary reaction to energy input. Observe, internal structure is destabilizing. Fold space resonance patterns are breaking down. The collapse is beginning." He was right. Rick watched as the breach's edges began curling inward, space folding back on itself with increasing velocity. The opening that had allowed Zentraedi fleets to pour through from another universe was shrinking, contracting, the dimensional tunnel between realities closing like a wound healing. "Zentraedi reinforcements are attempting emergency transit," the sensor officer reported. 6 capital ships pushing through before complete collapse. "They're going to make it." "No, they're not," Spock said with absolute conviction. "The collapse is accelerating. They have insufficient time to complete transit sequence." The first Zentraedi battlecruiser emerged halfway through the breach, 4 kilometers of warship materializing in a dimensional space that was simultaneously 2 universes and neither. Then the breach collapsed completely, the dimensional tear sealing with finality that sent shockwaves rippling across subspace. The battlecruiser, caught mid-transit, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, erased. Its mass distributed across probability spaces, scattered through dimensional boundaries that no longer connected. One moment it was emerging, the next it was gone as if it had never existed. The other 5 ships attempting transit suffered the same fate. Gone. Erased. Removed from existence by the fundamental laws of reality reasserting themselves. The dimensional breach was sealed. "Reading massive subspace distortions," Lisa reported, scanning frantically. "Shockwaves propagating outward at..." "Wait, they're dampening. Decay rate faster than predicted." Looks like Spock's calculations were conservative. "I programmed safety margins into all projections," the Vulcan said mildly. The actual collapse effect was within acceptable parameters, though the energy release exceeded theoretical maximums by 11.3%. Rick barely heard him, focused on the tactical display showing the Zentraedi fleet's reaction. Their reinforcements were gone. Their dimensional lifeline severed. They were trapped in a universe they'd never intended to fight in, cut off from resupply and support, facing an allied coalition that had just demonstrated the capability to eliminate their strategic advantages. The Zentraedi commander's face appeared on screen, and for the first time, Rick saw something other than cold calculation in those alien features. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. "You have destroyed our fold connection," the commander said, voice carrying undertones Rick couldn't quite interpret. "You have trapped our fleet in hostile space with finite resources and no possibility of reinforcement. This is unprecedented." "This is survival," Rick replied. "You came here hunting the SDF-1. You found a universe that fights back. I'm giving you one chance, Commander. Withdraw beyond sensor range, leave this sector, and we let you live. Stay here, and we finish what we started." The Zentraedi commander studied him through the view screen, calculating odds that had shifted dramatically in the past 30 seconds. His fleet was larger, but damaged and isolated. The Allied coalition was battered, but positioned defensively with proven capability to inflict catastrophic losses. "We will withdraw," the commander finally said, pride warring with pragmatism and losing. "But understand, human, this war is not finished. The Zentraedi do not forget. We do not forgive. When opportunity presents itself, we will return. Then we'll be ready," Rick said simply. "We've survived you before. We'll do it again." Looks like Spock's calculations were conservative. "I programmed safety margins into all projections," the Vulcan said mildly. The actual collapse effect was within acceptable parameters, though the energy release exceeded theoretical maximums by 11.3%. Rick barely heard him, focused on the tactical display showing the Zentraedi fleet's reaction. Their reinforcements were gone. Their dimensional lifeline severed. They were trapped in a universe they'd never intended to fight in, cut off from resupply and support, facing an allied coalition that had just demonstrated the capability to eliminate their strategic advantages. The Zentraedi commander's face appeared on screen, and for the first time, Rick saw something other than cold calculation in those alien features. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. "You have destroyed our fold connection," the commander said, voice carrying undertones Rick couldn't quite interpret. "You have trapped our fleet in hostile space with finite resources and no possibility of reinforcement. This is unprecedented. This is survival," Rick replied. "You came here hunting the SDF-1. You found a universe that fights back. I'm giving you one chance, Commander. Withdraw beyond sensor range, leave this sector, and we let you live. Stay here, and we finish what we started." The Zentraedi commander studied him through the view screen, calculating odds that had shifted dramatically in the past 30 seconds. His fleet was larger, but damaged and isolated. The Allied coalition was battered, but positioned defensively with proven capability to inflict catastrophic losses. "We will withdraw," the commander finally said, pride warring with pragmatism and losing. "But understand, human, this war is not finished. The Zentraedi do not forget. We do not forgive. When opportunity presents itself, we will return. Then we'll be ready," Rick said simply. "We've survived you before. We'll do it again." The transmission cut. Within minutes, the Zentraedi fleet began withdrawing, battlecruisers and support vessels pulling back with formation discipline that remained perfect despite defeat. They weren't fleeing in panic. Zentraedi didn't do that, but executing tactical retreat while maintaining combat readiness. Kirk's face appeared on screen, exhaustion and relief warring in his expression. "Commander Hunter, that was the most insane, brilliant, terrifying tactical operation I've witnessed in 20 years of Starfleet service. Congratulations. You just changed the strategic balance of this entire quadrant." "We all did," Rick corrected. "Enterprise held the line. Klingon forces bought us time. Romulan intelligence provided critical data. Spock made the impossible calculations. This was coalition victory, Captain. A victory that will have consequences, Kara's observed, his warbird decloaking nearby. The Federation Council will want detailed analysis of dimensional collapse technology. The Klingon High Council will demand explanation for unprecedented alliance with Federation forces. And the Romulan Senate, he paused, will require justification for sharing strategic intelligence with traditional adversaries. Let them demand whatever they want. Kor laughed, fierce joy in his voice. We faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. Warriors from 3 empires standing together against magnificent enemy. Today will be sung about in the halls of QoNOS for generations. Rick looked at the tactical display showing Allied vessels, damaged, depleted, victorious. The SDF-1's protoculture reserves had dropped to 31%. Enterprise needed extensive repairs. Klingon and Romulan forces had suffered severe casualties. But they'd survived. 1. Proven that cooperation between unlikely allies could achieve what individual powers couldn't. Spock to Commander Hunter. The Vulcan's voice interrupted his thoughts. I am detecting anomalous readings from the sealed breach location. The dimensional collapse has left residual exotic particles in surrounding space. These particles appear stable and may possess properties relevant to your protoculture refinement challenges. Rick's exhaustion lifted fractionally. You're saying the breach collapse might have created something we can use? Potentially. Spock hedged. The exotic matter signatures bear similarities to protoculture energy patterns. Further analysis is required, but preliminary data suggests these particles could serve as catalysts or supplements for your power generation systems. It would not solve your long-term sustainability challenges, but it might extend your operational timeline significantly. Hope, fragile and unexpected, bloomed in Rick's chest. Maybe, just maybe, the desperate gambit that sealed the breach had also provided the key to the SDF-1's survival beyond 18 months of dwindling reserves. All Allied vessels, Rick transmitted. The immediate crisis is resolved. The Zentraedi fleet is withdrawing, the dimensional breach is sealed, and we've all survived to tell the story. I recommend we reconvene in 12 hours for full debriefing and damage assessment. Until then, get some rest. You've earned it. As acknowledgments came in from Enterprise, the Klingon cruiser, and Romulan warbirds, Rick allowed himself to sink into the command chair, feeling every hour of sleepless preparation, every second of combat tension, every impossible decision's accumulated weight. Lisa approached quietly, datapad in hand but concern in her eyes. Skipper, we did it. We actually did it. Yeah, Rick agreed, voice barely above a whisper. We did. Though I'm still not sure how. Luck, skill, and allies we didn't have a week ago, Roy said, dropping into a nearby seat with equal exhaustion. Also, Spock's terrifying math abilities. Remind me never to play poker with Vulcans. Rick smiled despite himself. They'd survived the Zentraedi War. Survived dimensional displacement. Survived first contact with 3 interstellar powers simultaneously. Survived impossible combat against an enemy that had devastated Earth. And now they faced the future, uncertain, complicated, but possible. The Federation would want partnerships and oversight. The Klingon would seek continued warrior alliances. The Romulans would pursue strategic advantages. And the SDF-1 would need to navigate between all of them while protecting 70,000 civilians and searching for long-term sustainability solutions. But that was tomorrow's crisis. Tonight they'd won. Against impossible odds, with unlikely allies through desperate tactics and courage that transcended species and cultures. Rick Hunter, fighter pilot promoted too many times, commander of a vessel from another universe, looked at the tactical display showing Allied ships, Federation, Klingon, Romulan, and the massive SDF-1 at the center. Lisa, he said quietly, update our status logs. As of this stardate, the SDF-1 is no longer just a refugee vessel. We're an independent power working in alliance with the United Federation of Planets and associated forces. We've earned that position through blood, courage, and willingness to stand with others against common threats. Recorded. Lisa confirmed. Though Starfleet Command might have opinions about that characterization. They can have all the opinions they want, Rick said with tired satisfaction. We just saved this sector from Zentraedi invasion. I think we've earned the right to define our own status. No argument here, Skipper. Roy agreed. Though I suspect the real negotiations start tomorrow when Admiral Noguera arrives with 50 lawyers and 100 regulations. Then tomorrow we negotiate, Rick said. Tonight we rest. And for the first time since arriving in this impossible universe, Rick Hunter allowed himself to believe they might actually survive what came next. The weeks that followed the Battle of the Dimensional Breach, as Federation historians would eventually designate the engagement, transformed everything Rick Hunter had assumed about survival, belonging, and what it meant to find home in an impossible place. Admiral Noguera arrived with his delegation 4 days after the battle, bringing regulations, questionnaires, and the careful political weight of Federation bureaucracy. The negotiations were complex, contentious, and occasionally infuriating. But they concluded with something Rick hadn't dared hope for during those desperate early days: genuine partnership, not disguised control. The SDF-1 received formal recognition as an independent Allied vessel operating under cooperative framework with the Federation. Its weapons systems remained under Rick's command authority. Its civilians received Federation citizenship rights without mandatory relocation. Skull Squadron earned official Starfleet auxiliary designation that provided resources without eliminating operational independence. Spock's analysis of the breach's exotic particle residue proved correct. Combined with Federation quantum physics expertise, the SDF-1's engineering team developed sustainable protoculture synthesis methods that extended their operational capacity indefinitely. The fuel crisis that had haunted Rick since arrival was solved through exactly the kind of scientific cooperation the Federation offered at its best. The trapped Zentraedi fleet eventually sought negotiated settlement rather than attrition warfare. Isolated, outnumbered, and unable to resist cultural contamination from prolonged contact with Federation space. Some defected. Others returned to neutrality. A handful became unexpected allies. And Rick Hunter, fighter pilot from a devastated future Earth, found himself exactly where he never expected: home, in a universe that wasn't his own. The stars, at least, were the same. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories. Thank you for watching.